Chapter 1802. Meg and the rest returned to Chaos City successfully. The state of emergency had been lifted, and most of the ordinary residents only stayed at home for 2 days. After the ban was lifted, they couldn't wait to go out to the streets to look for food and shelter. Seeing the closed notice still hanging at the entrance of Mamie's, the customers who came specially could only sigh and go to Man-a Hot Pot restaurant for their hot pot. Dykus walked into the city lord's office quickly and said to Michael, who was standing by the window, "My lord, Mr. Mack has rejected the request to book the restaurant again." "That's an expected answer." Michael smiled. But many representatives wanted to go to Mamie's to hold a celebratory banquet. Dykus was a little worried. "This is our request. Mr. Mack has the right to reject it. There's no conflict." Michael shook his head with a smile. "The celebratory banquet will be held in the banquet hall of the city lord's castle. Invite the head chef of Dukas restaurant to cook." "Should we invite Mr. Alex?" Dykus asked. "Just send the invitation to Irina. They can decide whether to come or not." "All right." Dykus turned and left. It's too much to ask the main character of this celebratory banquet to cook for everyone. Michael shook his head with a smile. Mamie's would have a smaller but more delicious celebratory banquet tonight. Mamie's would indeed have a banquet tonight, but it wasn't a celebratory banquet. It was a welcoming banquet for Anne, who had just arrived at the restaurant. Anne and Amy were playing in the playroom on the second floor, while the other ladies went back to their respective dormitories to shower and change. Hence, only Meg was preparing for the banquet in the kitchen alone. He was still thinking about how to talk to Irina about adopting Anne. Unexpectedly, Irina took out a letter from somewhere when she returned to the restaurant. She looked at him with a half-smile and said, "I picked it up under the door yesterday. I've read the letter." Meg only took a glance at the words on the letter, and he was sure that it was written by Gloria. His eyelids twitched and his smile stiffened. "Miss Gloria and I are just ordinary work partners. Ordinary work partners can already recognize each other's handwriting." Irina's smile became even brighter. "Or should I say, this isn't the first letter like this." Meg choked. Sometimes, it wasn't a good thing to have a good memory. He wasn't sure what Gloria wrote in the letter, but Miss Gloria was a well-mannered young lady from a wealthy family. Perhaps she had something urgent to tell him, and it just so happened that he wasn't at the restaurant yesterday, so she wrote this letter. "I've seen her handwriting. You know, my memory has always been good." Meg's expression became calm. Anyway, he and Gloria were indeed very pure. She's a good lady. She didn't forget to remind you to leave Chaos City before she left." Irina placed the letter on the table gently. "This makes me seem like I'm not very capable." Meg was a little embarrassed. After all, he only thought of the people at the restaurant when he received the news yesterday. Irina smiled. She sized up Meg and curiously asked, "Not only have you recovered your power, you've even improved?" "I was just struck by lightning and became like this when I came back to my senses. Now, I'm almost on par with that octopus monster in the seal," Meg said with a smile. Irina looked at Meg's smile, but the smile on her face gradually disappeared. She raised her hand slowly and placed it gently on Meg's face. She stared at him for a long time without saying anything. Meg felt the cold fingertips glide across his cheek, but his heart warmed. "Next time, I won't allow you to force yourself." Meg nodded slightly. The atmosphere suddenly became a little more romantic. Meg looked at Irina's beautiful face, and her cheeks seemed to have a tinge of pink. It was a rare sight of her being shy. "Michael invited us to the celebratory banquet," Irina said uncomfortably as she retracted her hand. "Let's not go. I've already told them that we'll have dinner at the restaurant tonight. We'll hold a welcome banquet for Anne." Meg smiled and shook his head. "Anne?" Irina frowned. "I was just about to tell you about this. I went through the lightning tribulation with that octopus monster this morning, and I almost didn't make it through the last lightning tribulation. Unexpectedly, that octopus monster was struck by lightning, and a little girl appeared. She saved me. If the octopus monster is the embodiment of evil, then she's the embodiment of kindness. The octopus monster wanted to kill her, so I brought her out of the catacombs. Her mentality is similar to that of a newborn child. She's kind-hearted. Now that she has no relatives and she's my savior, I want to adopt her and raise her until she's an adult. I named her Anne, Meg said sincerely to Irina. Adopting Anne was Meg's decision, but he hoped to gain Irina's understanding and acceptance. Irina didn't say anything for a long time. She just stared into Meg's eyes. Meg felt a little uneasy being stared at like that. She's really not a child that you made with another woman behind my back? Irina's gaze was a little dangerous. You can verify this point yourself. She's playing with Amy upstairs now, Meg said calmly. Irina immediately turned and walked towards the stairs. She went up to the second floor with light footsteps. Meg followed behind her. Irina stood at the entrance of the playroom. She looked at the young girl who was quietly watching Amy and Ugly Duckling play at the side. Her eyes were filled with surprise. The young girl looked to be 12 or 13 years old. She had an exquisite face and a tall and thin figure. What was more eye-catching was her holy aura. She had never seen such a clean person before. She was like the morning dew shining on the top leaves of the tree in the morning. It was as if she wasn't tainted by any smoke or fire at all. With just one look, she was sure that Meg wasn't lying. After all, he was still in the army at the border of the Roth Empire 11 or 12 years ago. Moreover, she was such a clean and pure person. She shouldn't belong to this world. And heard the sound and turned to look at the door with a polite smile. Mother! Amy threw down the toy in her hand and jumped into Irina's arms. Then, she couldn't wait to introduce her to Irina. This is big sister Anne. Father said that she would live with us in the future. Although she can't speak now, she's really a very gentle big sister. Even Ugly Duckling likes her. Irina smiled when she heard Amy's words. She went forward and hugged Anne gently. She smiled and whispered in her ear, "Thank you, Anne," and was still smiling at her. Seems like there's no problem? Meg shrugged and turned to go downstairs to continue preparing dinner. No pop-up window. Chapter 1803. After going downstairs alone, Meg picked up the letter on the table and quickly skimmed through it. As he expected, the content of the letter was very pure. However, judging from the hurried handwriting, Gloria must have written this letter and delivered it to the restaurant after receiving the news of leaving Chaos City at the last minute. With family Moraton's influence, it was not surprising that they received the news of Chaos City's crisis in advance. However, Gloria still specially came to inform him to leave Chaos City in such an urgent situation. Her sincerity really touched him. Miss Gloria is really a trustworthy partner. Seems like we can continue to work together in the future. Meg stuffed the letter back into the envelope and casually threw it on the counter before going into the kitchen. A head popped out from the corner of the stairs silently. Irina glanced at the letter that was casually thrown on the counter and nodded thoughtfully. Meg's lips curled up slightly. After the upgrade, his hearing had improved greatly, so he naturally discovered Irina coming downstairs. I agreed to adopt Anne. Irina walked to the kitchen door and said to Meg, who was washing the vegetables, "She's a beautiful and obedient child, and Amy likes her too. It's great that you like her." Meg turned to look at her with a smile. Time seemed to have frozen on her face. She still looked like a young girl, but her every frown and smile had an incomparable charm. That pair of blue eyes was as pure and deep as the sea, and one could not help but sink into them. Meg looked at her in a daze. Irina met his burning gaze and felt her cheeks heating up inexplicably. She was a little shy and a little happy at the same time. She rebuked, "Why are you staring at me? Is there something on my face?" "It's a little pretty," Meg said with a smile. "When did you learn to say such things?" Irina narrowed her eyes and sized up Meg. Her curled lips revealed her feelings. "Do you know what I was thinking when the last bolt of lightning struck today?" Meg asked with a smile. "Dying?" It was so accurate. However, he quickly prepared himself mentally and looked at Irina with a gentle gaze. "I'm thinking that if I die without loving you properly one more time, then there's no point in living again." Irina looked at Meg in surprise. "Hello, Irina. Meg, are you willing to become the lady boss of Mamis?" Meg knelt on one knee. A sapphire ring appeared on his hand as if by magic, and he handed it to Irina. Irina opened her mouth slightly and looked at Meg, who was half kneeling on the ground. The man in front of her took off his armor and put down his invincible heavy sword. He wore a clean chef's uniform and offered the highest etiquette of a knight. He spoke to her gently and firmly. She wasn't the wife of a peerless general, nor was she the beauty of a dragon-slaying warrior. She was just the lady boss of a restaurant. But it was like a bouquet of pink flowers that smashed into her heart. The grievances and suffering she had suffered in the past 3 years, the tears that quietly flowed in the night, were all worth it at this moment. All she wanted was to live a simple and happy life with him and Amy. There was no need for the so-called righteousness of the country, the rise and fall of the race, and there was no need for her to be involved in the endless whirlpool of conspiracies. Becoming the lady boss of Immerse and starting a simple and sweet relationship with him was probably something that would make her happy. "I'm willing." Irina reached out her left hand to Meg. Meg gently held her fair and slender hand and put the ring on her ring finger. Then he got up and hugged her tightly. This wasn't a sudden decision, but a move that he had planned for a long time. He knew that he had already fallen in love with this woman. He knew very well that it wasn't a temporary crush, nor was it a desire for her body. It was true love. He had never had such feelings for a woman before. Because of the difference in their strength, he couldn't take that step. He wanted to be a man who could protect her, and not a man who always needed her protection. So he had already planned to tell her his feelings on the day he regained his peak strength. He was Meg, the boss of Immerse and Amy's father. He wanted to use this identity to fall in love with her and live with her. "Lady boss," Meg whispered in her ear. A faint floral scent wafted from her body. Meg's smile had never been so satisfied and relaxed. "Does the lady boss manage the money?" Irina looked up and asked with a smile. Meg looked at the smiling face so close to him. Her breath swept across his face, her long eyelashes, her blue eyes, and her passionate lips. His heart couldn't help but beat faster. He couldn't help but lower his head and kiss her. After a long time, the two reluctantly parted. Irina's cheeks were blushing, and her breathing was a little erratic. She glared at Meg with a dazed and coquettish gaze. "This guy has become so aggressive. But I really like it." Meg looked at her slightly swollen lips and resisted the urge to kiss her again. He said affectionately, "In the future, this house, including me, will be under your control." "That won't do. That's too complicated and will tire me out. I just need to manage the money." Irina shook her head and reached out her hand to Meg. She smiled and said, "The key to the money box. This is the key to the money box, and this is the key to the safe in the bedroom's wardrobe. All the large bills are inside." Meg took out 2 keys from his pocket and placed them in Irina's hands. Having a loved one to help manage the money was probably the happiest thing. And some people not only didn't have money, but also didn't have a wife. "Good boy." Irina looked at the 2 keys in her hand and leaned forward to kiss Meg's cheek. However, she quickly realized that her behavior was a little frivolous, or rather, too much like a young girl who had just fallen in love. Her face turned pink again. Meg was a little flattered and touched his face. Then he looked at Irina with a smile and said, "Go sit down and rest for a while. Leave the kitchen to me. It's all this guy's fault. He actually treats me like a child." Irina looked at Meg, and a sweet feeling welled up in her heart. All of a sudden, her eyes lit up and she said, "Why don't I change my identity and appearance as well? That way, I'll be able to officially become the boss of the restaurant, and Amy will be able to call me mother in front of outsiders. Also, we won't have to worry about those malicious people targeting us. Don't you feel wronged?" Meg looked at her a little worriedly. "Why would I feel wronged? I've thought about it before. If we want to stay away from those complicated things, we have to find a place that's isolated from the rest of the world. It's not fair to Amy. If we can live in Chaos City just by changing our clothes during the day, and Amy can be with her friends, why not?" Irina said matter-of-factly, "All right. From tomorrow onwards, let's get to know each other again." Meg looked at Irina with a smile. Chapter 1804. I think I can smell the sour smell of love. Amy, who was lying on the stairs, turned around to look at Anne. Sister Anne, did you find out? And shrugged with a smile. She didn't directly express her attitude, but her smile was exceptionally bright. In addition to the restaurant staff, Meg also invited Connie to the banquet. Sally's identity was too special, so he didn't invite her. Barbara had already sent a message that she would attend the banquet tonight instead of the City Lord's Mansion's celebration banquet. Camilla would also be coming tonight. Meg didn't invite anyone else. Tonight was Anne's welcome banquet to officially welcome Anne into Amy's big family. Not long after, Yabamiya and the others arrived at the restaurant one after another. They began to set up the dining area and help prepare the ingredients. What a cute little girl. Is this Anne? I'm Sister Barbara. This is a little moon for you. I really brought it back from the moon. Barbara took out a crescent-shaped glowing jade and stuffed it into Anne's hand, and held the little moon in her hand, her eyes sparkling. This little girl is quite cute. Then I'll give you this bracelet. Camilla casually untied a delicate black jade bracelet from her wrist and hung it on Anne's hand. Everyone had brought gifts for Annie, and they piled up into a small mountain on the table. Anne looked at the beautifully wrapped gifts with her mouth slightly open. Although she couldn't express it with words, one could see the joy in her heart from her smile. That's great. Luckily, I turned down the City Lord's Mansion's invitation. Otherwise, I would have missed this important moment. Connie placed the gifts on the table and said happily, Sister Connie, you're the last to arrive. Did you get lost again? Amy looked at Connie and asked. No, I just spent some time preparing the gifts for Anne. Connie blushed and shook her head. Ding. The system has completed the task of resealing the octopus monster. The system has obtained a recipe for the octopus tentacle series, including stir-fried octopus tentacles, octopus balls, octopus sashimi, and octopus in soy sauce. Ding. The octopus tentacle processing plant has been built and is in the process of debugging. Host, please set up a sales channel within 7 days and promote the way to eat octopus tentacles. Meg, who was busy cooking in the kitchen, suddenly heard the system's voice in his mind. Meg raised his eyebrows as he looked at the glittering recipe that appeared in his mind. Stir-fried octopus tentacles, octopus balls, and pickled octopus was one thing, but what the hell was this octopus sashimi? This was a slice of a great old one. Even though Meg was a wild eater, he still felt a little uncomfortable in his stomach. After all, his previous mission punishment was the octopus sashimi. Now, he had to make and promote this dish, which made him feel a little guilty. He couldn't even eat the small octopus sashimi, let alone the octopus monster that he had personally killed. At the same time, he was also surprised by the system's efficiency. He had just resealed the octopus monster in the morning, and now the system had already built the processing plant and entered the production debugging stage. It was hard to imagine what kind of environment the octopus monster, which was trapped in the new sealing formation, was in. What kind of operation method was the system's so-called 100 tons of octopus tentacles a day? The scene is too gory. The host is advised not to imagine too much, the system reminded him warmly. System, you're not going to provide the giant octopus tentacles, are you? Those giant octopus tentacles full of eyeballs. Let's not talk about whether the average person can accept them. Wouldn't they be exposed if they were taken out? Anyone can guess that these are the octopus monster's tentacles. After the system obtains the tentacles, it will immediately undergo a second processing process to make them look no different from ordinary octopus tentacles. The tentacles are all divided into 3 sizes, small, large, and are supplied cold and fresh, the system replied confidently. What about medium size? Sorry, there are no medium sizes. There's something. Meg nodded. He was relieved with the system's words. Quality and whatnot were produced by the system, so there was naturally no need to worry. Moreover, regular octopus tentacles could be made into food more easily. Seems like I have to work overtime tonight to learn all the recipes for octopus tentacles. Meg thought to himself. It was not enough for him to learn. How to promote it to the whole nation was the most important thing. If he couldn't bring about a craze for the whole nation to eat octopus tentacles, It would be unrealistic to want to sell them in large quantities. I have to lead the Norland continent's citizens to join in the great cause of eating the great old ones. Maybe I can achieve universal immunity, and I won't have to be afraid of mind control in the future? Meg thought casually. Add in the experiment of mental immunity after consumption. Meg didn't notice the line of insignificant words that flashed across his mind quickly. Dinner was quite sumptuous. Spicy grilled fish, beggar's chicken, Peking duck, Buddha jumps over the wall. Meg served almost all the dishes on the menu and filled the 6 tables that were put together. Tonight is Anne's welcome dinner. From today onwards, I will take Anne as my daughter. She will be a member of Amy's, Meg said to Anne as he stood up. Everyone applauded to welcome Anne. Anne's cheeks were flushed, and she bowed to everyone with a bright and beautiful smile. However, her gaze was a little unfocused because of the delicious food on the table. All right, everyone, let's eat, Meg said with a smile as he sat down again. Everyone then started to dig in. Amy sat beside Anne. As she ate, she recommended and introduced various ways of eating food to her. She taught by example as if she was a little sister, and obediently followed Amy's method and tasted all the food. The expression on her face became exciting and blissful because of the delicious food. The sumptuous dinner ended with everyone's enjoyment. Everyone, I have an announcement to make. Barbara stood up and looked at everyone with some reluctance. I will be leaving the restaurant for a period of time tomorrow. I promised my father that I would return to the Moon Nation with him. However, I will be back soon. It's all right. You haven't been home for so long, so of course you have to go back and take a look. We will wait for your return, Mia said with a smile. Everyone also smiled and nodded. Everyone already knew that Barbara's father had opened up the teleportation array between the 2 worlds, so they were not surprised that Barbara had returned to the Moon Nation. Barbara, if you have time, can I go to the moon to play with you? When I was young, I always dreamed of going to the moon. Connie looked at Barbara expectantly. Of course. If you want to go, I can take you with me this time. Barbara nodded with a smile. I can't this time. I still have to go back. Connie shook her head and said regretfully, I also have an announcement to make. From tomorrow onwards, I will not come to your restaurant to eat or sleep here, Irina said calmly as she stood up. Chapter 1805. Your Highness, are you leaving? Phyllis stood up abruptly and looked at Irina nervously. She knew how much the princess loved Boss's cooking, but she actually didn't come to Mamie's anymore and didn't stay in the restaurant anymore. Although she had heard that Master Alex had returned to the princess's side, she hadn't heard anything about her leaving. Everyone in the restaurant was also looking at Irina with surprise. Although she didn't work in the restaurant, she had been eating with everyone for 3 meals a day recently and even slept in the restaurant at night. They were already quite familiar with each other, so they couldn't help but feel a little sad when they heard that she wouldn't be coming anymore. Could it be because Master Alex defeated that devil, so big sister Irina is going to travel the world with him again? Connie looked at Irina expectantly. As someone who knew about the thrilling situation today, she had heard from her master how Alex courageously attracted lightning to strike the devil and successfully sealed it again. Furthermore, he had deduced that he might have entered the legendary godly realm and become the real #1 powerhouse on the Norland continent. When Alex and Irina were traveling the continent, she was still a little girl who liked to play with dolls. But now, she felt like she was participating in history. She might even be able to see Irina and Alex, this immortal couple, travel the Norland continent again. Hearing that, the ladies' eyes all lit up. Stories of heroes and beauties, immortal couples, had always been the most beautiful dreams of the ladies. Meg smiled. She wasn't going to travel the world. She was just going to be your lady boss. Maybe. We'll meet again if fate wills it. Irina smiled. A faint golden light lit up under her feet, and she disappeared from the restaurant. Big sister Irina really won't come again? Before Amy could react, Irina had already left. Maybe. Meg smiled and patted Amy's head. Finally, there won't be so much pressure in the future. Camilla secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Although there was no conflict, as long as Irina appeared in the restaurant, That powerful aura made her feel a little uncomfortable. Everyone said their goodbyes and left. While Gina was visiting her family, Meg moved her glass tank to the staff dormitory so that she could stay with everyone in the future. The second floor of the restaurant had returned to their private space and had joined the family, and Amy was gradually growing up. It was time for them to have their own rooms. As the head of the family, the master bedroom naturally belonged to Irina. As for when he would be able to step into the master bedroom openly and sleep on that big bed, he had no idea. After closing the restaurant door, Meg took the two little guys upstairs. "Father, did Mother really leave? Is she really not going to sleep with us tonight?" Amy still hadn't recovered from Irina's sudden departure. "Amy, your father has arranged a new room for you and Anne. From now on, you two little guys can sleep together." The three of them had just reached the staircase on the second floor when Irina, who was wearing a bathrobe, walked out of the bathroom. She pointed at the room that originally belonged to Gina and smiled. "So Mother didn't leave. And we have a new room." Amy's eyes lit up. She held Anne's little hand and said, "Let's go, Sister Anne. Let's go take a look at our new room." Only Meg and Irina were left in the hallway. Meg looked at Irina, who had just come out of the shower. Her slender, round thighs were exposed from the opening of the bathrobe. Her full breasts were faintly visible through the loose bathrobe. There was a faint blush on her fair face, like a lotus that had just come out of the water. She was exceptionally alluring. His Adam's apple moved very consciously, and he honestly expressed his thoughts at that moment. Irina flipped her long blonde hair, and the faint fragrance of jasmine wafted over. She tilted her head slightly and looked at him with a smile. "Amy and Anne will sleep in a separate room. Then, where will you sleep tonight?" Of course, he would sleep in the master bedroom. Meg's soul roared angrily. If he still rejected her at a time like this, then he definitely wasn't a real man. After coming to this world for so long, he had rejected so many flirtatious bitches. What was the point of staying chaste? Wasn't it all for the woman in front of him? Thinking of this, he was actually a little touched by his own infatuation. "I'm really a good man. However, from tonight onwards, I'm a real man." Ding. "Host, please note the expiration date of the recipe. You have to look at the big picture," the system advised earnestly. Meg glanced at the recipe in his mind. It had already entered the 5-hour effective countdown. What the fuck? Meg felt as if a basin of ice water had suddenly been poured over his hot and dry heart, and it turned cold. Irina looked at Meg, who was a little stunned. She couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed and angry, but she also felt that it was very interesting. "Mother, quickly come over and see. Our room is awesome." Amy poked her little head out of the room and called out to Irina. "You should sleep in the study tonight." Irina glared at Meg, tied the belt of her bathrobe, and walked towards Amy's room with her slender waist swaying. She couldn't hide the smile on her face. Meg spread his hands helplessly. However, this was also good. After all, he could learn all the recipes tonight, and there would be plenty of time in the future. As a god, even if he was a fake god, he had to be more mature. After calming himself down, Meg walked to Amy and Anne's new room with the same smile on his face. This room was more than 50 square meters. It was built on the foundation of Gina's aquarium and expanded to the second floor of the designated hot pot area. There were 2 cute princess beds in the room. The floor was covered with a soft carpet, and there were 2 transparent swings in front of the huge floor-to-ceiling windows facing Aiden Square. The 2 large wardrobes were filled with all kinds of clothes. Just like the beds, there was one for each of them, and the styles were very different. There was also a bathroom and a washroom in the room. They were all custom-made according to the height ratio of the 2 children. There was also a small bed specially prepared for Ugly Duckling beside Amy's bed. There were cute knickknacks everywhere in the room. A human-sized teddy bear was lying in the corner, and one could sit on its lap and play with it. "Do you like it?" Meg asked with a smile. This room was custom-made by him. Every item and decoration was bought by him from the system store. It could be said that this was the room that he put the most effort into in the whole house. "I love it so much. Father, I love you." Amy jumped into Meg's arms and kissed him on the cheek. and stood beside the bed and also gave Meg a big smile. Chapter 1806. In the end, Meg returned to the study and lay on the slightly hard floor. After thinking for a while, he got up and locked the door. Only then did he close his eyes in relief and enter the test field for the god of cookery. There were a lot of recipes to learn tonight, so he had to hurry up and not affect the restaurant's business the next morning. As a boss with professional ethics, he had already stood his customers up for 2 days. He had to reopen the restaurant tomorrow, or else he would be letting down his money box. Of course, there was another important reason. He had to make the Octopus series famous as soon as possible so that he could do the follow-up promotion work. While Meg was thinking, a white light flashed and Meg stepped into the test field for the god of cookery. However, what appeared was not the familiar kitchen, but a huge octopus monster. Those familiar tentacles, familiar eyeballs, familiar low growls, and he only had a fathead fish in his hand. Fuck! Before Meg could complain, the octopus monster had already pounced on him with bared fangs and brandished claws. Who are you guarding against? Irina twisted the doorknob at the door, but it did not budge. Looking at the closed door, she stomped her feet in embarrassment and turned back to the master bedroom. That night, Meg successfully developed a strong immunity to all tentacles and dense objects. He even felt that his mental strength, which was strengthened by the thunder tribulation, had been further enhanced. Therefore, he had some new understanding of the system's so-called culinary god. System, fuck your mother. When Meg opened his eyes, he could not help but curse in his heart. Host, I'm honing your will. The system said with some grievance. Then I still want to fuck your mother. The system slowly typed out 3 question marks. Bulge, fuck. Meg gave it the middle finger and turned over to get out of bed. Although he was exhausted from being tortured by the tentacle monster in the test field for the god of cookery, when he opened his eyes, he felt refreshed all over, as if he had just had a good sleep. He glanced at the alarm clock on the desk. It was exactly 6 in the morning. It's time to make breakfast. Meg changed into a chef's uniform. After washing up, he went downstairs to cook a big pot of porridge. Starting from today, he would provide breakfast for the cleaners again. Then he began to prepare breakfast for Irina. From today onwards, she would not be eating with everyone, so Meg had to prepare a breakfast of love for her in the morning for her to eat first. As for lunch and dinner, he was still unclear about Irina's arrangements. The steak was fried in the pot, and the broccoli was boiled in the boiling water. This was the breakfast that Irina had requested last night. Looks like you slept well last night? Irina went downstairs and leaned against the door frame, looking at Meg, who was busy in the kitchen. There was a trace of bitterness in her smile. Well, it's okay. Meg nodded, not noticing the abnormality in her expression. Irina snorted. Meg turned around in confusion and looked at Irina, who had a hint of resentment in her eyes. You didn't sleep well last night? No, I slept very well. Irina looked serious and showed her usual dignified appearance. She couldn't say that she couldn't sleep last night. It would be too embarrassing. Wait a moment. The steak will be ready soon. Do you want a cup of warm milk? Meg smiled. Irina nodded and didn't leave. Instead, she stood at the door and continued to watch Meg fry the steak and warm the milk. It might be hard for outsiders to imagine that the man who attracted lightning to strike the devil actually got up early in the morning to make breakfast for her. Such a considerate and gentle appearance warmed her heart. After a while, Meg came out with the steak and warm milk. The steak that exuded a wonderful meaty aroma had been cut into just the right size to eat, but it still looked like a whole piece on the plate. A few emerald green broccoli and small cut tomatoes adorned the side of the plate, and the milk on the side was still emitting steam, just the right temperature to eat. Please. Meg smiled and pulled out a chair for Irina. Thank you. Irina tiptoed and kissed him on the lips, then sat down on the chair. A trace of red rose quickly on her cheeks, but she calmly picked up the fork and ate elegantly. Meg licked his lips and looked at Irina, who was eating with her head slightly lowered. He recalled the electric light kiss just now, and the corners of his mouth curved up. What a wonderful feeling! Was this the feeling of being in love? Even if it was just a light kiss, It made people feel full of joy. I'm leaving. Irina finished the steak and drank the milk. When she got up, she stuck out her pink tongue and licked the milk at the corner of her mouth. Should I save lunch for you? Meg, who was busy in the kitchen, walked out. No, I'll arrange it myself. Irina smiled mysteriously. Meg didn't know what was going on, but he didn't ask. He just took a tissue and wiped the milk at the corner of her mouth that she hadn't licked clean. Shouldn't you be licking it off for me at this time? Irina looked at his face, which was close to hers, and asked with a faint smile. Meg's hand holding the tissue froze. Looking at her clean mouth, he suddenly felt that he had really become a gentleman. I'm just teasing you. Irina smiled sweetly as she turned around and walked toward the door. A golden light flashed beneath her feet, and she disappeared from the restaurant. It's quite fun. Meg couldn't help but laugh. He didn't expect that there would be a day when he would be led by a woman. It was quite interesting. It was a completely different experience. Not long after Irina left, Phyllis was the first to come to the restaurant. Boss, did Her Highness really not come to the restaurant to sleep last night? Phyllis looked at Meg nervously. Yes. Meg nodded apologetically. Since Irina didn't tell Phyllis the truth, he naturally couldn't bring himself to ask. All right. Seems like she really left with Lord Alex. Phyllis was a little disappointed. Her Highness didn't even tell her, and left just like that. She didn't even know where to look for her in the future, and how to serve her. She might still be in Chaos City. After all, you guys are still here. Meg smiled. The Night Elves business had just started, and Irina couldn't just leave it like that. After all, the Wind Forest was still eyeing them covetously. You're right. Phyllis's eyes lit up. Then, I'll go back to see if she's back after I'm done with my work. Camilla and the rest also arrived one after another. Connie came too. She was here to bid farewell to everyone. She was the chief of the Fok tribe now, after all. No matter how lazy she was, she still had to go back to hold the fort. However, Oster had lost an arm to the octopus monster, and his power was greatly reduced. He would most likely be quiet for a period of time after he went back, and that saved Connie a lot of trouble. Don't be sad, my friends. The peace conference is in 7 days' time. I will be back again. Connie waved at everyone, and left with the Ruggiamo that Meg had prepared for her. Chapter 1807. Meg wrote a new notice on the small blackboard at the door to today's new products: stir-fried octopus tentacles, octopus balls. Meg was suddenly thankful that the City Lord's castle did not announce the details of the devil to the ordinary people. Otherwise, no one would be interested in his new products. Father, let's go back after breakfast. I've already informed the boss yesterday. Barbara happily led the Moon Nation's king and the group of people to the outside of the restaurant. She raised her hand to knock on the door and glanced at the conspicuous small blackboard hanging on the door. Barbara and the group of people from the Moon Nation stared with their eyes wide open when they saw the 2 new dishes. Their expressions suddenly became a little indescribable. They suddenly don't have much of an appetite. Why don't we skip breakfast? Barbara smoothed her churning stomach. When she saw the octopus tentacles, she couldn't help but recall the octopus monster with countless terrifying tentacles in the dark cave. All right, let's go back to the palace for breakfast. The king smiled and nodded. This boss was rather interesting to launch these 2 new products at such a time. The rest of the powerhouses from the Moon Nation naturally had no objections. Although they could not forget the boss' culinary skills, the octopus monster had a great impact on them. Many of them even had nightmares last night. Barbara rang the bell, and Mia opened the door to let them in. There's still 20 minutes before the opening ceremony. What would you like to eat? Meg looked at Barbara and asked with a smile. Boss, we've decided not to have breakfast in the restaurant. We plan to go back earlier. Barbara's complexion recovered a lot, but she still felt that she could not eat for a while. She was flustered. Meg glanced at Barbara, who had an unnatural expression, and guessed that she felt nauseous because of the 2 new dishes. He couldn't help but find it funny. Mr. Meg, thank you for taking care of my daughter during this period of time. This is a small token of my appreciation. I hope you can accept it. King Kenneth stepped forward and took out a large chest that was half a person's height from the king's scepter, placing it in front of Meg. Meg glanced at the wooden box that could fit a young lady. The edges were wrapped in gold, and the surface was inlaid with large and small gems. Whether it was gold or something more valuable, it was obviously a large sum of money. "There's no need to be so polite, Your Majesty. Princess Barbara is a very exceptional talent. Even if she doesn't stay in the restaurant, I'm sure she'll be able to live a very good life on the Norland continent," Meg said with a vibrant smile. Barbara, who had heard Meg's flattery for the first time, raised her chin proudly. "Of course, I'm the princess of the Moon Nation." Kenneth smiled a little dotingly. "If you're in a hurry to return to the Moon Nation, why don't you pack some food to bring back? Breakfast is basically ready." After receiving such a large chest of treasures, Meg naturally couldn't let them go back empty-handed. Otherwise, it would seem that the people of the Norland continent were too stingy. Barbara, who didn't have much of an appetite, heard that, and her eyes lit up. She looked at Meg and asked, "Boss, is tofu pudding okay too? I want to bring some back for my mother." According to the rules, tofu pudding couldn't be taken out. Meg frowned and pondered for a while before asking, "How long will this teleportation take? After the teleportation, how long will it take for you to send the tofu pudding to your mother?" Barbara pondered for a while and said, "The teleportation only takes an instant. It will take about 2 minutes to run from the underground palace to my mother's bedroom. It will be delivered within 3 minutes, and it won't affect the taste." "That's good too. I'll make an exception and pack a portion of tofu pudding for you." Meg nodded. It wasn't that he was unreasonable usually. Firstly, there wasn't a lot of tofu pudding, and there wasn't enough for them to eat at a restaurant. Secondly, the tofu pudding couldn't be shaken and would break into pieces easily. Once it turned cold, the taste and texture would plummet. It was on a completely different level from eating at a restaurant. "That's great. Then I'll have a portion of sweet tofu pudding," Barbara said happily. She didn't expect the boss, who always talked about the rules, would actually agree to this request. Now that she was in a good mood, Barbara felt a little hungry. She thought about how she wouldn't be able to eat Mamie's delicacies for a while after returning to the Moon Nation, so she said, "I'll have a portion of soy milk and 2 youtiao." Following that, King Kenneth and the powerhouses of the Moon Nation also ordered their breakfast under Barbara's guidance. Meg packed their food into boxes one by one. Then, the group of people carried their breakfast bags and stood in the teleportation portal in the middle of the restaurant. "Goodbye, everyone. I'll be back soon." Barbara waved at everyone. "Big Sister Barbara, remember to bring a rabbit back. Father said that the rabbit on the moon is super delicious," Amy called out loudly. "Okay," Barbara's voice dragged out the last syllable, and it disappeared along with a flash of white light. Everyone waved at the air, and then started the preparation work for the morning business. Meg, on the other hand, carried the heavy box with both hands, and slowly went upstairs to the second floor. The box was very heavy, about 500 to 600 kilograms. This was naturally nothing to Meg, but in order to maintain his image as a pretty boy, he could only appear to have some difficulty. When he reached the study on the second floor, Meg lifted the lid of the wooden box. Just as he lifted a corner, a bright light had already lit up the entire room. Meg hurriedly put the lid back down, turned around, locked the door, and drew the curtains. Only then did he lift the lid of the wooden box with ease. Hiss! A whole box of glowing gemstones appeared in front of Meg's eyes. Rubies, emeralds, sapphires, opals, super diamonds. This employee is really a profitable investment. Meg picked up a bright sapphire and tossed it in his hand. Any gemstone here could be sold for the price of 1,000,000 copper coins, and there were about 400 to 500 such gemstones in the box. As expected of the king, such a small gift is so interesting. Meg casually picked up 2 gemstones in his hand, then closed the lid. He walked around the study a few times, then finally moved the bookshelf away, dug a small hole in the wall behind, and then carefully hid the 2 gemstones inside. He moved the bookshelf back to its original position, then looked around to make sure that there were no traces left behind. He opened the door with a bright smile and went downstairs. "Wow, Mr. Mac is going to launch 2 new dishes today. 2 days of rest, 2 new dishes, feel like we're making a killing? What's an octopus? What's an octopus tentacle? Who can explain this to me? This octopus is a kind of aquatic product in the sea. It's like a flat winter melon, and its stomach is full of tail-like tentacles. It's a kind of aquatic product commonly seen by the sea, but usually no one eats it. At the entrance of the restaurant, the customers lined up to look at the notice hanging on the door and were having a heated discussion. Chapter 1808. You may be making a killing, but I will never lose out. Meg stood in front of the one-way floor-to-ceiling window and listened to the discussions of the customers outside with a smile on his face. A chef's greatest satisfaction was to be able to let the customers maintain their enthusiasm and anticipation for the new product. Amy stood behind Meg with Ugly Duckling in her arms and asked curiously, "Father, why didn't you make a new product for all of us in the morning?" Everyone also looked at Meg. Usually, when Meg launched a new product, he would make a taste test for everyone in advance. However, he didn't do that this time. Meg pondered. It wasn't easy for Meg to come out of the test field for the god of cookery, so he really couldn't eat anything related to octopus so early in the morning. Of course, he didn't doubt that the stir-fried octopus tentacles and octopus balls that he made would be amazingly delicious. Because these 2 dishes aren't suitable for breakfast, I categorized them into stir-fried dishes and snacks. Let's eat them at Little Amy's in the afternoon, Meg said with a smile. Okay, I want to eat the balls. Amy nodded her little head. She was craving the cute balls on the menu just now. Okay. Meg smiled dotingly. He thought that octopus balls would become the most popular snack among children again after ice cream. It was 7:30 a.m., and Meg opened the restaurant's door on time. The customers rushed into the restaurant and greeted Meg familiarly as if they were old friends. The atmosphere was relaxed and joyful. Perhaps this is what a lively life should be like. Meg raised his eyebrows slightly. If he stood here as Alex now, he would lose this group of customers and friends who gathered here for the food. Harrison put down the menu in his hand and asked Meg dejectedly, "Mr. Mack, isn't the new product launched in the morning?" "Yes, the new product isn't considered breakfast. It will be launched officially at noon today," Meg said with a smile. Harrison sighed and said, "That's too bad. I wanted to eat a cute ball to soothe my stomach after being left out for 2 days." The customers who were full of anticipation all looked at Meg with resentment. They were happy for nothing. Meg pretended not to see it. Sargeras walked in and respectfully said to Meg, "Mr. Meg, we need 200 Ruggiamos. Has the Burning Legion expanded again?" Meg looked at Sargeras. Another batch of clansmen has arrived," Sargeras said with a silly smile. "Okay," Meg nodded his head and turned Mr. Mack. Barbara's departure made the staff in the restaurant a little tight. Fortunately, Jane and Angela had gradually familiarized themselves with the work in the restaurant and quickly filled the gap. The customers walked out of the restaurant with satisfied faces after eating and drinking to their heart's content. It was a new day full of vitality. Take care. Yabamiya sent the last customer off with a smile, closed the door, and heaved a long sigh of relief. "Thank you for your hard work," Meg said with a smile as he walked out of the kitchen, removed his apron, and put it aside. Elizabeth cleaned the restaurant, and the girls went to Yabamiya's ice cream shop together. Amy and followed them. "Boss, my father asked me to pass this to you." Gina didn't leave with the rest. After everyone left, she took out an exquisite jade box from a crystal ball and placed it on the table gently. "What is this?" Meg looked at the rectangular jade box that was about 1/2 meter long and 10 centimeters wide, and looked at Gina with confusion. "Please open it gently." Gina took a step back and blushed slightly. "Another thank you gift?" Meg's eyes lit up slightly. He received 2 big gifts early in the morning, and they were both from the leader of a tribe. He couldn't help but look forward to it. Although Lantis had been sealed at the bottom of the sea for thousands of years, their heritage hadn't been broken. Their civilization had sunk to the bottom of the sea with the ruins, so there should be a lot of good stuff. Meg opened the lid of the jade box with anticipation. There wasn't a scene of radiance as he expected. An ancient black scepter lay quietly in that exquisite white jade box. The black scepter looked like it was carved out of black jade. There was a blue crystal ball embedded at the top, and many mysterious and ancient runes were engraved on the smooth and exquisite scepter. Although there wasn't any radiance, Meg could feel an ancient aura from this scepter. This is? Meg looked up at Gina. He couldn't understand why Lantist would give him such an important scepter. This is the Deep Sea Scepter, the symbol of the highest authority of Lantist. It is also the only holy item of Lantist, Gina explained solemnly. Why would you give such a precious scepter to me? I'm not a mage. Meg was even more puzzled. Gina suddenly raised the scepter above her head with both hands, and knelt on one knee in front of Meg as she respectfully said, Lantist requests Mr. Meg to become the guardian of Lantist. You will wield the scepter, protect Lantist, and enjoy Lantist's offerings. Meg was a little confused by Gina's sudden yellow robe. Gina, I am willing to follow you for the rest of my life. I will be your slave and serve you. Gina finished her sentence with a red face. The yellow robe and the promise of a beauty seemed to have reached the peak of life. However, Meg had just confessed successfully yesterday, and his wife had officially announced her return. He couldn't afford to mess around. Gina, get up first? Meg hurriedly helped Gina up from the ground. He didn't hide his dual identities from Lantist. He could deduce that this decision was made after seeing him attract lightning to strike that octopus monster yesterday. Even he couldn't help but admire the boldness of the king of Lantist to be able to hand over the control of Lantist completely and let the princess of a tribe follow him. However, Irina had finally gotten rid of the restriction of her identity as an elven princess. He naturally didn't want to bear the burden of protecting a tribe. The title of guardian deity was not a joke. Lantist had already started to step into this world officially. There might be conflicts with the other tribes someday. As the owner of the Deep Sea Scepter, he definitely couldn't just stand by and watch. If he agreed, it would be equivalent to licking a lot of karma for himself. Gina's face was red. She didn't dare to look at Meg directly, but she couldn't help but sneak a peek at him. Her gaze was a little shy, but also a little expectant. She was so nervous that she didn't even know where to place her hands. Gina, I can't accept this scepter. Go back and tell the king that I thank him for his kind intentions. However, my abilities are limited, and I can't take on the heavy responsibility of being a guardian. I also don't have the power to manage Lantist. If Lantist is in trouble and I can help, I definitely won't stand by and do nothing. Meg looked at Gina with a smile. As for you, you are an employee of the restaurant and also my friend. If you don't mind, you can stay in the restaurant until you are sick of it. No pop-up window. Chapter 1809. Meg admitted that he couldn't bear the responsibility of protecting the tribe. He even worried if he could be a good father and husband. Gina stared at Meg blankly as if she didn't expect him to reject her. She was stunned for a while before she helplessly said, Did I do something wrong? No, you didn't do anything wrong. Lantist didn't do anything wrong either. Meg placed his hand on Gina's head gently to calm her flustered emotions. He smiled at her and said, if Lantist doesn't fight with other tribes, you naturally don't have to worry about them entering the sea to fight with you. Why do you have to hand over the scepter to an outsider like me and be controlled by others? I will always be Lantist's friend. If you need my help, I naturally won't sit back and do nothing. Moreover, I'm just a human, not some god. I like to cook, I like restaurants, and I like such a simple life. Power is nothing to me. Gina looked at Meg with her mouth slightly agape. He seemed to be emitting a holy glow, just like the Savior who appeared in the crystal ball that day. A simple, happy life. Gina seemed to have understood something. She nodded vigorously. I will go back and tell Father and the High Priest the truth. Go. Meg retracted his hand with encouragement in his eyes. Meg heaved a sigh of relief as he watched Gina leave. Luckily, Irina wasn't around. Otherwise, he would have to explain what it meant to follow him for life. Hannah's rum brewery should be completed by now, right? Meg pushed his bicycle out as he prepared to go to the north of the city to check on the progress of Hannah's rum brewery. Many customers had been asking about rum recently. Secondly, Meg was also preparing to put the mass production of Moutai and whiskey on the agenda. Brewing beer on his balcony was already the limit. The brewing of whiskey and Moutai required a bigger venue and a longer brewing time. Building a brewery and entering the mass production stage was naturally a very good idea. Alcohol was a very profitable industry. Beer, rum, whiskey, and with Meg in his hands, he was very confident that he could monopolize the high-end alcohol market on the Northern continent. As for the wine, Meg decided not to replace the Buffett winery for the time being, for the sake of the hill. Host, please don't be addicted to making money. As a candidate for the god of cookery, exporting delicacies to this world is what you should be doing. The system reminded. Money? I have never touched money. I have no interest in it. I just want the wine lovers in this world to be able to enjoy real wine, so that those inferior wines can have a sense of crisis and direction of improvement, Meg said with a lofty expression. He rode out of the shop and greeted Mabai and Lulu, who were resting in front of the blacksmith shop. He whistled and rode away. Mr. Mac is such a dashing person, Mabai said with a smile as he looked at Meg's back. He is a good person, Lulu said with a silly smile. Before he reached the brewery, Meg could already see the white smoke coming out of the tall chimney from afar. This lass really can't wait to start work. Meg raised his eyebrows. It seemed like Hannah had already started testing the machine. He could understand Hannah's impatience. After all, this rum brewery, from the machine drawings to the layout of the factory, was all rushed out by her day and night. After that, she even squatted at the construction site every day and watched the 2 shifts of craftsmen work overtime to build it. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was the crystallization of her painstaking efforts. Bam! Meg had just parked his bicycle at the entrance of the brewery when an explosion came from inside. This is? Meg looked at the tall chimney swaying in a cloud of black smoke, and fell down unwillingly. A group of craftsmen who were perfecting the details of the factory's environment ran out in a panic with a face full of fear. Meg dashed into the billowing black smoke immediately, and pulled Hannah, who was still in a daze, out. Hannah, whose face was blackened, and her hair was standing on end like a golden lion king, was stunned for a moment. She blinked before she noticed Meg. Then, she revealed a shocked expression. It exploded. Yeah, I saw it. Meg pursed his lips and tried not to laugh out loud. It exploded just like that. Hannah looked innocent as she repeated with a sobbing voice. Yeah, I saw it. Meg turned his head and couldn't help but laugh out loud. He was professionally trained. But he couldn't hold it in. After Meg finished laughing, he turned back to look at Hannah, who was in a daze, and patted her shoulder to comfort her. It's okay. The people are still here. Everything can start from the beginning. Start from the drawing? Hannah's eyelids rolled, and she fainted in Meg's arms. This child? Meg hugged Hannah, and first instructed the craftsmen present to put out the fire caused by the explosion. He didn't want them to be in a hurry to clean up the scene, and sent Hannah to the nearby textile factory. Irina wasn't there, but there were mages who knew healing spells, and there was also a professional hospital. After all, there were 30,000 night elves. The explosion didn't hurt Hannah. She fainted because of exhaustion and the despair of having to draw again. The elven healer cast a calming spell on her, and her furrowed brows relaxed. Her breathing gradually calmed down, and she fell asleep. That elf also cast a cleaning spell on her, and cleaned Hannah, who was covered in soot, and changed her clothes. The elf came out of the room and said to Meg, "She'll be fine after she wakes up. Thanks for the trouble. Let her rest here for a while, I'll pick her up later." Meg glanced at Hannah, who was lying quietly, and turned to leave the infirmary. Meg returned to the brewery. Looking at the mess on the floor, he couldn't help but feel speechless. The boiler had exploded, and the brewing machine was scattered all over the floor. The whole boiler room was in a mess. Meg took out an N95 and put it on. He squinted his eyes at the smoke-filled factory and asked in his mind, "System, check the problem." Host, 1,000 copper coins. Meg covered the system's mouth. "But the host has no money now." Meg's expression froze and he smiled. "I have some private money." After about a minute, the system's voice sounded. Scanning complete. Reconstructing the 3D drawing according to the blueprint. Found 6 structural problems and 3 material problems. The brewing machine blueprint has been redrawn. Do you want to print it? Of course. Meg nodded. 2 copper coins per print. This blueprint has a total of 32 pages. The fee is 64 copper coins. Deducted. The system's cheerful voice sounded. Meg looked at the thick stack of blueprints in his hand and complained about the system's greed in his heart. However, he was still quite satisfied with this abnormally standardized blueprint. Chapter 1810. Boss, why don't we stop making wine? I think I'm good at serving dishes. Hannah looked at Meg, who came to pick her up, and said seriously, "How can you face your grandfather like this?" Meg frowned. I feel that he left quite peacefully and didn't have that big of an obsession to pass down the rum. Hannah muttered. Meg didn't say anything and just looked at her quietly. I don't think it's easy to serve dishes. It's just. Uncle, I don't want to work hard anymore. Hannah was about to cry. I don't want to draw. I don't want to draw anymore. Here. Meg took out the stack of drawings from his back and waved it in front of Hannah. What's this? Hannah squinted at the drawings and found them familiar. When you were sleeping, I went back. The scene was a bit tragic and there were some problems with the machine, so I helped you change it. Meg said calmly. Really? Hannah's eyes lit up and carefully took the drawings from Meg. She roughly scanned the drawings, and the more she looked, the more impressed she became. Finally, she looked at Meg with stars in her eyes. Boss, did you really draw this while I was sleeping? There were more than 30 drawings, and they weren't changed from the original ones. They were completely redrawn. Although the overall structure was roughly the same, all the dimensions were newly set. It had to be known that she had spent more than half a month working hard every night to painstakingly draw out the drawings. She had also spent a few days checking the dimensions and researching and forging with Mabai. However, the boss had only used half a day to redraw the design drawing and adjust the size of it. Meg nodded. In fact, after the system gave him the drawings, he also walked around the north of the city and chose 2 pieces of land next to the rum distillery to build a brewery and a Mautai distillery. He was worried that it would affect the noon business, so he came to find Hannah. It won't explode again, right? Hannah had a lingering fear. In theory, there shouldn't be a problem. Meg nodded. Are you sure? Yes. Boss, you're the best. Hannah gave Meg a big hug. The dejection on her face was swept away, and she was full of energy again. Meg pushed Hannah's forehead with a finger. Give yourself a day off today. I've already asked the workers to remove the destroyed machines from the factory and have them repair the factory. You can give the blueprint to Mabai first and see if he has time to make it for you. If the continent doesn't explode, Hannah won't rest. Hannah shook her head. I'm going to look for the Mabai boss now. I think I'll have to go to the materials market. The materials on the market don't look simple. Okay, then take my car. I'll take you back. Meg didn't stop her. He took her out and rode the flashy bicycle back to the restaurant. Boss, did you already know how to make this machine? On the way, Hannah asked in hindsight. No, I didn't. Don't talk nonsense. Then how did you draw such a perfect picture in such a short time? I drew it for a long time. Hannah didn't believe him. Maybe this is talent, Meg said casually. Hannah clenched her small fists and gritted her teeth. She wanted to hit someone. Meg stopped in front of the blacksmith shop. Before the bike came to a stop, Hannah jumped off the bike impatiently. She waved at Meg and rushed into the blacksmith shop. Mabai boss, did you put the bomb in the boiler? I was almost blown to death by you. Meg raised his eyebrows slightly. He seemed to have overlooked this possibility. However, there was no smell of gunpowder at the scene. Mabai probably wouldn't use any cylinder as a cannon. Ignoring the discussion in the blacksmith shop, Meg pushed the bicycle into the restaurant and began to prepare for the noon business. The new product to be released at noon, stir-fried octopus tentacles and octopus balls. Meg opened the refrigerator. The small and large octopus tentacles were already in place. The small octopus tentacles were as thick as a person's middle finger. The large octopus tentacles were as thick as a baby's arm. The large octopus tentacles weren't put in the refrigerator. The thickest part was almost half a meter in diameter. They were sold to large customers such as giant dragons. The restaurant didn't need them. The octopus tentacles looked very fresh, as if they were freshly cut from an octopus that had just been fished out from the sea. The skin on the surface and the small suckers on the tentacles were exactly the same as ordinary octopus tentacles. There was no difference at all with the naked eye. No one would associate it with the terrifying octopus tentacles that were as thick as a person and filled with large eyeballs. Just this point alone made Meg admire the system's methods. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that it was a work of art. After spending more than 100 days in the test field for the god of cookery, Meg was completely immune and numb to the octopus tentacles. However, this brought about a big problem. He had no desire to eat them. Yes, although he had faced his fear, he still couldn't get over it in his heart. If there was anyone in the world who understood the octopus monster the most, it would be him. They were friends who had gone through a calamity together. Therefore, for the time being, he still couldn't get rid of the knot in his heart and eat it. Of course, since the system could safely make it into an ingredient and supply it on a large scale, there was no need to worry about food safety. Speaking of which, this octopus monster had lived for millions of years. It would be an understatement to call it a sacred beast. Perhaps eating the octopus tentacles would have some special effects. After closing the fridge, there was a small meatball machine with more than 100 small holes on the stove. Octopus meatballs were a rather complicated snack. It was very particular about the control of the fire and the way it was handled. This undoubtedly added some burden to him. Fortunately, his strength had increased. His strength above level 10 was enough for him to handle this little bit of work in the kitchen easily. If it weren't for the fear of scaring the customers eating outside, they might not even have seen his shadow. After a while, Amy and the others returned to the restaurant. "Father, are we having octopus meatballs for lunch?" Amy skipped through the door and looked at Meg expectantly. "Okay, I'll make it for you in a while." Meg smiled and nodded. "That's great." Amy jumped up and down happily. The others also showed some anticipation for the new dish. "I don't have much of an appetite. I'll take a plate of fried rice home later." Camilla looked a little unnatural. She was the only one who had seen the octopus monster. She even had a nightmare last night. Thinking of the octopus tentacles full of eyeballs, she really couldn't bear to see it appear on the dining table. Meg looked at Camilla. He didn't expect her to be afraid of the octopus monster. He suddenly remembered that he still had a photo stone in her hands. If it fell into Irina's hands one day, he would inevitably be beaten up. He immediately smiled and said, "Are you feeling unwell? Do you want Cece to take a look at you? Eating together is a tradition in our restaurant. Stir-fried octopus tentacles are such a great delicacy. You must try it." No pop-up window. Chapter 1811. Camilla took a deep look at Meg. She had a feeling that there was a lot of hostility hidden under his kind and gentle smile. "Could it be that you are afraid of octopuses?" Meg smiled at Camilla. "If that's the case, then forget it." "Afraid?" Camilla laughed scornfully. "I am a countess, a 9th-tier powerhouse. Why would I be afraid of a little octopus? Isn't it just an octopus? I am going to eat it today. You have a backbone." Meg gave her a thumbs up in admiration. He really admired people who could say such insincere words for the sake of their pride. "Humph." Camilla snorted with an uncomfortable expression. She regretted it the moment she said that. She was very scared. But now, she had to wait for the stir-fried octopus tentacles to be served for the sake of her pride, and she even had to eat it herself. Meg and the rest were busy preparing in the kitchen. There was already a long queue outside the restaurant. The restaurant was closed for 2 days, and they were going to release 2 new dishes this afternoon. Hence, many customers were looking forward to trying the new dishes this afternoon. And among the customers in the queue, there were some powerhouses from various races who had yet to go home. Although the celebratory banquet at the City Lord's castle last night was sumptuous, the taste could not be compared to Mamie's at all. Hence, they were not in a hurry to go home, and were prepared to have a good meal at Mamie's before leaving. Although Mamie's followed the principle of first come, first served, the residents of Chaos City were very grateful to the powerhouses from various races who had rushed over to help during Chaos City's crisis. Hence, after a round of modesty, the powerhouses from various races all came to the front of the queue. The residents of Chaos City are indeed a little different, Lewis lamented. Indeed. If it were any other place, no one would dare to come up for a meal when they see us old fellows standing here. No one would dare to make us stand in the queue for a meal, Douglas said with a cold expression. What's the big deal about queuing? As masters, we have to queue every day. Crassus rolled his eyes. If it weren't for the fact that Crassus and Julian were at the front of the line, they might not have been able to wait in line. However, the owner's culinary skills were superb, so it wasn't too bad to line up for a meal. After all, there were already more than 10 level 10 experts lining up. What new product is this? Are they octopus tentacles? Lewis noticed the small blackboard hanging on the door and was surprised. Hearing this, everyone looked over and their expressions suddenly became a little strange. For the past 2 days, their hearts had been broken by the octopus monster. Whenever they thought of its gigantic body that was hundreds of meters tall and those octopus tentacles that were covered with scarlet eyeballs, they felt a chill run down their spines and their stomachs churn. Coincidentally, the boss had released a new dish made from octopus tentacles today. What? Are you scared? Crassus turned around and chuckled at Lewis and the rest. There was a hint of mockery in his smile. It's just tentacles. What's there to be scared of? Lewis said nonchalantly, but his fingers couldn't help but tremble. Hearing Crassus' words, the powerhouses who were about to leave immediately stopped in their tracks. No matter what, they couldn't let anyone see that they were scared. Then, do you want to order 2 servings to try later? Crassus stared at Lewis with a faint smile. Since it's a new product, of course we have to try it. Lewis nodded matter-of-factly without even frowning. Hee, then let's share a table later. Crassus laughed. We haven't drunk together in a while. Let's have a few drinks today. Old man Jie isn't a good person. Lewis glanced at Crassus from the corner of his eyes, and then looked at Douglas and Julian. Douglas, Julian, you two come and have a few drinks too. After all, the 4 of us had a fight in the past. Today, let's try the taste of octopus tentacles together. We've been through thick and thin together. I can drink the alcohol. As for the octopus tentacles, I'll pass. Douglas' eyelids twitched. I'm allergic to seafood. You're almost 2,000 years old. How can you be allergic to seafood? Even if you're allergic, can you have red dots? Lewis rolled his eyes. I'm not eating it. Julian's answer was even more simple and direct. He rejected coldly and had no intention of discussing it at all. Can that thing really be eaten? Just thinking about it gives me goosebumps all over my body. Dracula was also in the crowd now. He patted the goosebumps off his hands with a look of disdain. I'd rather die than eat that thing. A few powerhouses from the orcs and dwarves at the side nodded in agreement. They had already made up their minds to stay away from Lewis's table later. The big shots from the various races standing in the front row were all inspiring and admirable. And in the line, there were 2 beauties who were rather eye-catching. One of them was Miss Gloria, who often came to the restaurant for meals. The news of her becoming the only successor of Family Moraton had already spread throughout Chaos City's business world. She had already become someone who could stand on par with Miss Hill. And she was only 18 years old. Her beauty after removing her veil was even more stunning. Admiring such a beauty was also an eye-pleasing thing. However, her limelight today was mostly stolen by the young lady in the other line who was almost beside her. That young lady had long golden hair that reached her waist. Her exquisite face did not lose out to Gloria's at all. Her bright golden eyes were filled with confidence, and her graceful figure made even women want to take a few more glances at her. The young lady glanced at Gloria from the corner of her eyes without batting an eyelid. The corners of her lips curled up slightly with an indecipherable deep meaning. The preparations for business were already in place, and the staff's meal was already served. Everyone took their seats and waited quietly for Meg to serve the last dish, stir-fried octopus tentacles. Camilla sat uneasily and kept glancing in the direction of the kitchen. She was conflicted between leaving and staying. In the kitchen, Meg tossed the wok skillfully. The octopus tentacles, green and red peppers danced in the flames, and the warm aroma wafted over. He turned off the fire and took it out of the wok. He placed the brightly colored stir-fried octopus tentacles on a white porcelain plate. There was no need to add any decorations, and it already looked alluring. The octopus tentacles that were cut into about 3 centimeters long were mixed together with green peppers, red peppers, and purple onions. They were stained with a layer of alluring brown sauce, and completely lost the scary appearance of the original green and red tentacles. As expected of me, I can even make the great old ones so alluring. Meg picked up the plate and walked out of the kitchen. The freshness of the octopus tentacles had already begun to blossom wantonly. Moreover, compared to normal octopus tentacles, the freshness of this octopus tentacle was even more conspicuous. It was an irresistible smell. Meg smiled as he placed the stir-fried octopus tentacles on the empty seat in front of Camilla. "All right, the dishes are ready. Let's dig in." No pop-up window. Chapter 18:12. Everyone's attention was attracted by the stir-fried octopus tentacles that had just been served. The extraordinarily prominent freshness wantonly spread out, and even the table full of delicacies could not cover it up. Green peppers, red peppers, and purple onions were used to complement each other. The quick stir-frying preserved their bright colors and made this dish look even more tempting. "It smells so good. It's even more delicious than prawns." Amy took a deep breath. "Yes, it looks like it will taste great." Mia nodded in agreement. "This is octopus tentacles?" Camilla looked at the plate of stir-fried octopus tentacles in front of her and fell into confusion. This was completely different from the huge octopus tentacles that were covered in sticky mud and covered in scarlet eyeballs in her impression. After being cut into small pieces and covered in oily sauce, it became the main character that made people salivate among the brightly colored side dishes. What was even more outrageous was the delicious aroma that greeted them. The hot spiciness mixed with the irresistible freshness made it seem like it had just been fished out from the sea. She could not help but swallow her saliva. No matter how delicious it looks, it's still an octopus tentacle. It's a terrifying and evil octopus tentacle. Camilla warned herself seriously in her heart, but her throat moved uncontrollably. "Then I'll start eating." Amy picked up her chopsticks, stretched out her arm to pick up an octopus tentacle from the plate, and put it into her mouth. The crisp octopus tentacle made a crisp sound between her teeth. Amy's eyes lit up and her cheeks moved quickly, making light chewing sounds. A blissful smile unconsciously appeared on her face. Gulp. Everyone swallowed their saliva. Judging from Amy's expression, this must be another delicacy. "I'll try it too." Mia also eagerly picked up a piece of octopus tentacle and put it into her mouth. Her eyes immediately turned into crescents. The crisp octopus tentacle had an incomparably delicious taste, and it was almost suffocating when it danced with the sauce on the tip of her tongue. "This is too delicious. It's so fresh that I can almost chew my tongue." After swallowing the octopus tentacle with great difficulty, Mia exclaimed with a look of amazement. The stir-fried octopus tentacles that had received double certification immediately became the focus of everyone's tasting. For a moment, low moans and praises could be heard. Everyone was convinced by the deliciousness of the stir-fried octopus tentacles. "What? You don't want to eat?" Meg smiled as he looked at Camilla, who had a conflicted expression on her face. More than half of the octopus on the plate had been eaten, but Camilla still hadn't started eating. "I'm not afraid." Camilla glared at Meg and picked up a piece of the octopus tentacle with her chopsticks. The octopus tentacles that were wrapped in sauce did not look scary. The aroma that drifted over with the heat was extremely tempting. "This is just an ordinary octopus, not an octopus monster, not an octopus monster, not an octopus monster." Camilla began to hypnotize herself. Then she closed her eyes and put the octopus tentacle into her mouth. His teeth bit open the octopus tentacle. The crisp and tender texture was even more wonderful than the meat in the crayfish, and the incomparable freshness was released between his lips and teeth, as if a king had descended. Just then, the tip of her tongue touched the tiny suckers on the tentacle. Freeze! The octopus monster that was hundreds of meters tall suddenly appeared in Camilla's mind. Her sticky tentacles writhed and wrapped around her, and pairs of scarlet eyes stared at her. That sticky feeling was so real, wriggling and wriggling on her body, fear, disgust, and a trace of indescribable pleasure. Camilla felt that she was completely unable to move, and could only let the octopus monster do whatever it wanted to her. Just as she was on the verge of breaking down, a ray of light suddenly appeared in front of her. The octopus tentacles that were wrapping around her body were cut off by a sword, and the confinement and sticky feeling around her body instantly disappeared. And behind that ray of light, she saw a figure standing with his head held high. It was as if he was the only one in the world. Could it be him? Then, the figure with his back facing her slowly turned around. He smiled at her. Camilla saw that face clearly. It was actually Meg, and he was holding the fathead fish in his hand. My. Camilla suddenly opened her eyes and gasped for air. She just happened to meet the smiling Meg looking at her. For a moment, she actually had an indescribable feeling. What was this? Shouldn't her hero be like Alex, riding on a purple-striped griffin, holding the Tian-Du sword, and summoning thunder to save her? It should be a beauty like Miss Gloria. How did it become Meg holding a kitchen knife? However, her attention was quickly attracted by the changes in her body. She suddenly realized that the cultivation problem that had troubled her for many years had actually loosened, and she had an epiphany. She could vaguely see the world of level 10. Really? Camilla had a look of disbelief on her face. It had been more than 10 years since she broke through to level 9. Although she was known as the vampire with the best talent after Dracula, she was still stuck at the bottleneck when it came to breaking through to level 10. After confirming that her cultivation bottleneck had really loosened, she couldn't help but gulp. What was lacking from level 9 to level 10 was the comprehension of the Great Path. Although the strange illusion from before was a little creepy, it allowed her to see some things that she had never seen before. Her mental strength seemed to have increased, and she had an epiphany. Could it be because of these octopus tentacles? Camilla looked at the octopus tentacles in front of her and hesitated for a while. Then she picked up a squid tentacle and put it into her mouth. There's actually no reaction? And there's a second one immediately? Meg looked at Camilla in surprise. Although her reaction when she ate the octopus tentacles for the first time was quite interesting, it didn't seem to make her retreat. Could it be because it's too delicious? Camilla didn't care about what Meg was thinking at all. When she ate the octopus tentacles for the second time, that sticky octopus monster didn't appear again. Instead, it was Meg who saved her and flew with her on his kitchen knife, roaming the sky. Although the terror index of the illusion was much lower than the first one, it still gave her goosebumps. What was going on? Why was he haunting her like a ghost? Could it be that he drugged the food? Camilla opened her eyes again and looked resentfully at Meg, who was putting food into Amy and Anne's bowl. However, she could clearly feel the increase in her mental strength. Unable to resist the temptation, she picked up another octopus tentacle and put it into her mouth. This time, the scene changed from the sky to a sea of flowers. Meg ran and laughed with her in the sea of flowers. Camilla was speechless. How the hell did this turn into a TV series? Camilla ate the octopus tentacles in a speechless manner. Although she couldn't look directly at the bizarre illusions, she couldn't refuse the opportunity to advance. Ding! Her chopsticks touched the plate, but she didn't pick up the octopus tentacle. Camilla looked at the plate with only a few onions left in front of her and was stunned. It's already finished, big sister Camilla. Amy bit into a drumstick. Looks like you really like eating octopus tentacles. Everyone smiled when they heard that. Camilla was too engrossed in eating just now and showed great interest in the octopus tentacles, so everyone only tasted a few mouthfuls and didn't continue to pick up the octopus tentacles. Camilla quickly realized what had happened and blushed. It's really quite delicious. After saying that, she didn't forget to glare at Meg. Meg raised his eyebrows a little innocently. What was this? He made such delicious octopus tentacles, and she still had to glare at him after eating it? Father, I'm done eating. When can we eat the octopus balls? Amy put down her chopsticks and asked Meg. Everyone also looked at Meg. Stir-fried octopus tentacles gave everyone a wonderful experience, so they had greater expectations for the other ball with a cute name. However, Meg said that it was a snack earlier, so it wasn't served during the meal. Wait a moment, I'll go make it for you now. How many people want to eat it? Raise your hand and say your name. Meg put down the empty bowl, got up, and walked to the kitchen. It was just the right time to make the aftermeal snack. I want a large portion. Amy raised her small hand, glanced at Anne, and added, Sister and wants a small portion. I want a small portion too. Mia raised her hand. Phyllis and I want a small portion together. Angela raised her hand. Okay, I know what to do. Meg agreed in the kitchen. While he turned on the octopus ball machine and preheated it, he began to cut and mix the various ingredients needed. It was just a small octopus ball. If he wanted to make it delicious, he had to put more effort into it. After the machine was preheated, he poured a little olive oil into each groove, scooped up a spoonful of octopus flour batter from the wooden bucket beside him with a long spoon, and poured the batter into each of the small grooves like a dragonfly skimming the water. In almost the blink of an eye, he had poured 40 balls. After that, Mag scooped up a spoonful of finely chopped alpine cabbage from the side dish box and sprinkled it around casually. The snowy white cabbage shreds were evenly distributed in every nook and cranny. Fresh red peppers, freshly peeled corn kernels, and octopus tentacles cut into the length of a knuckle were placed one by one into the grooves and wrapped in the batter. Then, another layer of batter was poured in. The temperature of the iron plate was high enough, and the batter was quickly formed. Meg held a slender iron skewer in his right hand as if he was holding a sword. His wrist shook up and down, and the already formed side was flipped up from the bottom. Because his hand speed was fast enough, the progress of each ball was almost the same. In the blink of an eye, there were dozens of golden balls on the octopus ball machine. At this time, he added a little olive oil and let the balls fry for a while. When they were crispy on the outside, he could immediately take a plate and put them on it. 4 balls were a small portion, and 6 were a large portion. He squeezed salad dressing and ketchup, sprinkled seaweed powder, and then grabbed a handful of thin mojito and seaweed shreds to sprinkle. A serving of freshly made octopus balls was done. No pop-up window. Chapter 18:13. Meg walked out of the kitchen with 8 servings of octopus balls on a tray and placed them in front of everyone who asked for them. The round, golden octopus balls were placed on a black square plate and covered with wooden fish flowers and seaweed. They looked delicate and cute. Look, these octopus balls can move. Amy approached the octopus ball in front of her in surprise, and her azure blue eyes were wide open. The wooden fish flowers on the octopus balls were like blooming flowers, slowly shrinking and moving. Is this some kind of bug? Anna was a little scared and took a step back. Don't be scared, this isn't a bug. Mag smiled as he looked at the astonished crowd. The ones that are moving are the wooden fish blossoms. Because they were cut as thin as paper, and the temperature of the octopus balls was very high, the wooden fish blossoms deformed from the heat, and looked as if they were moving. Amy reached out and picked up a small piece of wooden fish flour. The wooden fish flour was thinner than paper and was transparent. Even breathing could make it sway slightly. Amy put the piece of wooden fish flour into her mouth and smacked her lips. This fish made of wood disappears as soon as it enters my mouth. Everyone laughed as well. The octopus balls are a little hot. Be careful when you eat them. Meg reminded them. Of course, the correct way to eat octopus balls is to eat them together with the wooden fish flowers and seaweed. Oh, so hot. Before Meg could finish, Angela was already panting with her mouth open. Her eyes rolled back because of the heat from the octopus ball in her mouth. She wanted to spit it out but couldn't bear to. She looked like she couldn't stop. Everyone who was about to eat immediately stopped what they were doing and looked at Angela a little worriedly. Angela was in a difficult position. How could she have known that these harmless and even cute golden octopus balls would be so fierce after being bitten? The crispy outer shell wrapped around the lava-like insides. Hot. This was a signal released by her mouth that she was in danger. However, before she could turn her head and spit it out, the hidden deliciousness rushed out impatiently. The fresh and sweet corn, the slightly spicy red pepper, and the crispy octopus tentacles exploded in his mouth when he was enveloped by the magma-like alpine cabbage. The sweet and sour tomato sauce and sweet salad dressing on the surface, as well as the fresh and delicious wooden fish flowers and seaweed, joined in the chaotic battle. In the midst of the painful torture, the deliciousness gradually gained the upper hand. The freshness of the octopus was so distinct, and it bloomed with an irresistible deliciousness under the contrast of all the side dishes and condiments. In a trance while she was in a trance, she seemed to see some strange scenes, as if some mysterious laws had flashed before her eyes. Of course, she wasn't able to see and understand them yet. After a while, the temperature in her opened mouth finally dropped slightly. She was finally able to chew at ease and swallow the small meatball in her mouth. "Is it good?" Big Sister Angela, Amy asked curiously. Her expression just now had scared her. The others were also looking at her curiously. Her expression just now was too complicated, so they couldn't tell whether the octopus was delicious or terrible. "If you can wait a little while before eating, I think it's a delicacy that no one can resist," Angela said seriously. She then picked up her chopsticks and put the second octopus into her mouth. Phew. She fell into the torment of pain and enjoyment again. She actually started to enjoy the feeling of being in a trance, as if she could just grab a little bit of it and break the secret of the succubus's curse again. Seeing Angela completely ignoring them, everyone hesitated for a moment before trying to figure out what kind of magical power the golden octopus had. With Angela as an example, everyone had some expectations of the temperature of the octopus. They carefully blew on it for a while before putting it into their mouths. They were also very careful when they bit into it. As soon as they felt the heat in their mouths, they immediately stopped eating and opened their mouths to let the heat dissipate. When the temperature was right, they continued eating. "It's so delicious. It's crispy on the outside and tender on the inside. Although the taste is slightly lighter than the stir-fried octopus tentacles, the freshness of the octopus is better preserved. It's another kind of delicacy." For a moment, the praises were endless. All the girls were completely immersed in the scrumptiousness of the octopus balls. Meg's lips curled up. It seemed like the octopus balls suited everyone's taste. Camilla sat at the side. Her atoms apple-bobbed, but her expression didn't change. She suddenly regretted not ordering an octopus ball just now. After eating one octopus ball, and glanced at Camilla. She put down her chopsticks and gently pushed the plate in front of Camilla. She made an eating gesture with her hand and then revealed an obedient smile. "You're letting me eat?" Camilla looked at Anne in surprise. Annie seemed to understand her words and nodded her head. "I'm full." Camilla was about to push the plate back, and shook her head and pointed at the octopus balls. Then she raised a finger. "Try one," and nodded hard. A smile appeared on Camilla's face. She suddenly felt warm. After a slight hesitation, she picked up the chopsticks and put one octopus ball into her mouth. The explosive deliciousness caused her tongue to go wild once again, and the continuation of the TV series caused her face to flush red, as if a pair of hands were really gently caressing her body. "Thank you, Anne." Camilla opened her eyes. She pushed the plate back in front of and while panting slightly. Then she glared fiercely at Meg. Meg was confused. He didn't force her to eat it. Why did she look like he took advantage of her? There were many doubts in his little head at this moment. The octopus balls were quickly eaten. The delicious snacks ended this satisfying work meal. "All right, let's get ready for business." Meg glanced at the clock on the wall. He tidied up his chef's uniform and walked to the entrance of the restaurant. Everyone quickly cleared the table and switched to work mode in the next second. Gina wasn't around in the afternoon, and Barbara had returned to the moon. It was inevitable that they were a little short on manpower. Everyone had to be very alert. Meg glanced at his watch. The second hand pointed to 12. He pushed open the restaurant door. "Welcome, Amy's," Meg said with a smile. He looked past the 10th level powerhouses in front of the door and was stunned when he saw the blonde girl standing beside Gloria. Chapter 1814. The girl standing in the crowd had a tall and graceful figure. She was still the center of attention in the crowd. She had a delicate and tall nose bridge, long golden hair that reached her waist, and 2 light pink beast ears that were thin and translucent. She was clearly a beautiful and moving beastman lady. The girl seemed to have sensed something. She looked up at Meg. Her eyes were bright and clear, and she smiled at him. Meg's eyelids twitched. "How is this an animal ear girl? This is clearly Irina in disguise. She's not an elf, but an animal ear girl. Don't say. These animal ears are quite cute. I want teeth." Meg almost slapped himself. "Am I such a person? I don't want anything." At this moment, Miss Gloria, who was standing at the side, was also looking at Meg expectantly. When Meg looked over, she had already adjusted the details of her dress. She looked up at the right moment, waiting for their eyes to meet. It was great to see Mr. Meg again. When she left Chaos City, she had been worried about what would happen if Mr. Meg didn't see the letter. If a terrible disaster really happened, would she still be able to see him again? When she returned to Chaos City this morning, she didn't even go to talk to Jeffrey. Instead, she went straight to Amy's. However, Meg's gaze didn't land on her. Instead, it landed on the girl beside her. She felt an inexplicable sense of loss. Gloria couldn't help but sneak a glance at the girl beside her. She had a delicate face, smooth and fair skin, and that noble aura. She had a voluptuous figure and cute animal ears. Even as a woman, she was stunned. What a beautiful girl. Gloria was shocked. She couldn't help but sigh in her heart. That's right. Anyone would want to take a few more looks at such a beautiful girl. Meg quickly retracted his gaze and straightened his body slightly. He still greeted his regular customers warmly, but he was less witty than usual and more serious. Even when the ladies who admired him passed by, he only smiled inwardly and did not use his watery eyes to look at them. The group moved forward quickly. Gloria and Irina arrived at the door almost at the same time. "Mr. Meg, it's been a while." Gloria looked at Meg with a blush on her face. Although she had many things to say in her heart, she could only say, "Long time no see." When she thought of the letter that had been stuffed under the door into the dining room, she felt her cheeks burn. Such an unladylike action made her want to run away. Meg glanced from the corner of his eye at Irina, who was half a step behind him and looking at him with a half smile. Then he looked at Gloria, who was blushing, and suddenly felt a headache coming on. Vaguely, he felt that a folding chair was not far from his head. "Miss Gloria, it's been a while." Meg nodded slightly and greeted Gloria in a friendly manner like an ordinary old friend. Of course, he usually did this. But today, he felt like there was a knife at his back. But now, he was extremely scared. He felt like he was being publicly executed. He didn't mention the letter. Gloria was slightly happy, but also a little disappointed. With an inexplicable feeling, she walked into the dining room with a red face and lowered eyes. "Hello, I'm Audrey. I heard that your food is delicious, right?" A clear and confident voice sounded. Gloria subconsciously slowed down. Although she restrained herself from looking back, she couldn't help but tilt her head slightly to listen to the voice behind her. "Audrey, it's a very nice name." Meg looked at Irina with admiration in his eyes. As for whether the food is delicious or not, Miss Audrey needs to taste it personally. Yes. He liked Irina's outfit. He also liked the feeling of talking freely in front of everyone. He also liked the scene and the conversation between the two of them when they first met. "I like delicious food, and I also like people who can cook." Irina looked at Meg and smiled sweetly. She strode past Meg with her long legs. "Boss, isn't this too much?" "Meow, I'm jealous." "Boss, I want to learn how to cook." The male customers inside and outside the dining room looked at Meg with envy. He already had priority in choosing a spouse. The girls who admired Meg looked a little resentful. But when their eyes fell on Irina, they sincerely felt that only such a perfect person like her was worthy of such an excellent man like Mr. Mac. Meg smiled slightly and didn't take it to heart. But in his heart, he was very happy. This was different from those girls who kept saying, "Mr. Mac, I love you," or "I want to give birth to your children." Irina really gave birth to his children. No, it was Amy's. Mia and the others also looked a little surprised. This was the customer's first time eating at the restaurant. They didn't expect her to be so open and bold. Gloria clearly heard Irina's words. She was a little shocked. How could she be so bold? Although she didn't say it, she couldn't help but blush. At the same time, she was a little worried. If she ate Mr. Meg's food, she would definitely fall in love with him. Would Mr. Meg accept her? She felt as if a small stone had been thrown into her heart. For a moment, she was a little confused. She found a table for two by the window and sat down. "Can I sit here?" A sweet voice interrupted her thoughts. Gloria looked up and just happened to meet Irina's eyes. She was a little surprised, but quickly nodded and said, "Of course, there's no one else sitting here. Thank you." Irina elegantly sat down across from Gloria. Gloria quickly adjusted her state of mind. Although her aura wasn't as strong as Irina's, she was still the daughter of a noble family. After all, she had been honed in the business world for a while, so she could hold her own. She sat calmly with a smile on her face and looked at Irina with the same politeness. Many guests looked over. Two extremely beautiful women were sitting at the same table. Everyone would find them pleasing to the eyes if they took a second look. Wow, what a beautiful big sister. Amy, who was sitting behind the counter with N, saw Irina and her eyes lit up. However, she was a little puzzled and whispered in a low voice, "But why does this big sister look a little familiar?" and looked at Irina with a puzzled expression. She tapped the glass of water next to her and drew a long-haired elf on the counter. However, no one noticed. "Do you like the owner of this restaurant?" Irina was the first to break the silence and asked with a smile. Chapter 18:15. Gloria, who had regained her composure, widened her eyes and looked at Irina with her mouth slightly open. How could she ask such a question? Gloria was anxious to explain, but her mind was in a mess. She didn't know what to say for a moment. Did she like Mr. Mac? She had never seriously considered this question, or rather, she had been avoiding this question. Mr. Meg was special to her. If it weren't for that tofu pudding, she might still be the little girl who could only cover her face with a black veil, carefully living in a dark corner, not knowing the value of her existence. It was Mr. Meg who made her throw away the veil, find the pursuit of life, and find the value of her existence. And he, who was full of talent, always helped her gently behind her back. Other than her father, no man had ever treated her like that. Did she like him? Maybe she did. But she had been carefully hiding this thought, afraid that others would see through her, and afraid that Mr. Meg would know. She was afraid that if she did something presumptuous, Mr. Meg would be disgusted, or she would lose his gentleness forever. She looked up at Irina, who was sitting opposite her, and suddenly understood something. Yes, even she, who had met Mr. Meg for the first time, dared to say such bold words. Why did she have to be so humble and hide her feelings? Mr. Meg is a gentle and talented person. Gloria smiled at Irina. I think everyone will like him. Irina narrowed her eyes slightly and started to look at this beautiful and pure girl. Everyone liked him, and that naturally included her. However, it was doubtful whether her liking was the same type of liking as others. Other people only said that Meg's cooking was delicious, but she didn't mention it at all. Instead, she said that he was talented, which meant that she had seen through the surface and had a deeper and longer understanding of Meg. It vaguely showed that she was the first one. As for gentleness, that was a somewhat ambiguous word. Was he gentle with words? Or gentle with actions? Was he gentle in the restaurant? Or was she gentle in bed? Any change of location or subject would represent the progress of their relationship. But no matter which layer it was, her goal of secretly declaring her sovereignty had been achieved. This was the so-called thousand-layer pancake theory of love. Her simple sentence, how many layers one could see would depend on one's cultivation. Irina glanced at Meg, who was walking towards the kitchen from the door. She felt a chill run down her spine. She glanced at Irina and Gloria, who were sitting opposite her. She gulped and quickened her pace. What was so terrifying about this Azura field? He clearly didn't do anything. Gloria blushed a little, but she still tried to maintain a calm expression. At least in terms of aura, she would not allow herself to lose to Irina again. This was a defensive battle that could not be lost. I came here because of its reputation. I heard the food in this restaurant is very delicious. Can you recommend it to me? Irina opened the menu and looked at Gloria with a smile. Gloria, who was prepared for the next round of attacks, was slightly taken aback. She didn't expect Irina to suddenly ask her for help. Out of politeness, she replied seriously, Mr. Meg is the best chef in Chaos City. Every dish he makes is very delicious. However, different people have different tastes, so they may like different things. I prefer lighter flavors, so I usually order a sweet tofu pudding and a rainbow fried rice, which is also known as Yangzhou fried rice. Occasionally, I also order a black pepper steak. Braised chicken and rice is also a very good choice. Irina listened attentively and looked at Gloria with admiration in her eyes. This young lady was indeed very kind-hearted to be able to recommend food to a potential competitor so sincerely. Thank you for your recommendation. Irina nodded with a smile. Then, she said calmly, I heard the owner has a 3-year-old daughter. Will your family allow you to marry an old man with a daughter? Gloria, who had thought that the atmosphere had calmed down, was caught off guard by another powerful attack. Little Amy is a very cute and kind little elf. I think everyone can get along well with her. Gloria smiled. Of course, don't you know who gave birth to her? Irina raised her delicate brows. Mr. Meg is in the prime of his life. Compared to those childish and ignorant people of the same age, I prefer to deal with mature people, Gloria continued. The phrase, in the prime of life, was very much worth pondering over. Irina was looking at Gloria with more respect now. Compared to her bashful appearance when she had just entered the room, she had actually advanced by leaps and bounds at a time like this. Is your family okay with it? Irina continued to ask. Gloria choked. With her grandfather's personality, if he handed the family Moraton to her, he would definitely not allow her to marry Mr. Meg. He might even ask her to take in a son-in-law. Mr. Meg was a stunning man. How could he be willing to be a son-in-law who lived off his wife? It's hard to be happy in a marriage without the blessings of your family. Irina looked at Gloria and comforted her. I'm different. I don't have a family. Gloria blinked and looked at Irina. She suddenly felt a sense of defeat. She was clearly at a disadvantage in this first confrontation. The corners of Irina's mouth curled up slightly. Although this was an insignificant victory to her, it was even more satisfying than smacking a 10th-tier loser away with a stool. I'm Audrey. You're very beautiful. May I know your name? Irina asked Gloria with a smile. Gloria was slightly stunned. She suddenly felt that she was a little funny. She actually felt so emotional because of someone whose name she didn't even know. I'm Gloria. It's nice to meet you, Gloria said with a smile. Your clothes are beautiful. Is it custom-made? Irina's gaze landed on the long gray down jacket Gloria was wearing. Meg had given her a similar one, but it was white. Although the clothes of the ladies in the restaurant were all given by Meg, they were work clothes, so she didn't care. But if it was a lady outside, this is made by our factory. It's not custom-made. Gloria shook her head with a smile. She was a little surprised that someone as beautiful as Irina hadn't heard of suede. She hesitated for a moment and asked, Miss Irina, did you just come to Chaos City? No pop-up window. Chapter 1816. Yes. I've only been in Chaos City for a few days. Irina nodded slightly, but she was thinking to herself, so he bought all his clothes from her. Not bad. Buying women's clothes from a beautiful lady. You've grown up. Then, you can come to my shop when you're free. It's in Aiden Square. It's called suede. Gloria smiled. She glanced in the direction of the kitchen and lowered her voice. Actually, this set of clothes was designed by Mr. Meg. Irina raised her eyebrows with a hint of surprise on her face. Gloria's smile was tranquil, and the corners of her mouth curled up slightly. She seemed to have scored a point in this round. This boss is really a talented person. I like him very much. Irina smiled, and even turned to look in the direction of the kitchen. She didn't hide the admiration in her eyes at all. Gloria, Sigma, A. Meg was flipping the skewers on the grill in the kitchen. His gaze drifted to the two people by the window, and he felt a little guilty for some reason. Miss Gloria was gentle but not weak. She had a kind personality, so he didn't have to worry too much. However, Irina just had to choose to sit with her. He didn't know if it was because of the letter yesterday, but that made him a little uneasy. The customers took their seats and started to order their dishes. Crassus, Julian, Lewis, and Douglas sat at the same table. The four of them looked at each other. None of them was in a hurry to touch the menu on the table. "What would you like to eat?" Yabamiya asked with a smile as she came over with the menu. Lewis looked at Yabamiya with a smile and asked, "My good disciple, what do you recommend to me?" "I think every dish is very delicious. There's a new dish today. Master, you can try the stir-fried octopus tentacles and octopus balls. They're all very delicious," Yabamiya said with a smile. Lewis's smile froze. Yes. "Give him a serving of stir-fried octopus tentacles and a serving of octopus balls. Don't be shy. It's on me." Crassus clapped his hands. Lewis's face darkened. However, he was the one who had bragged to Crassus outside the restaurant. He could only bite the bullet and say, "Give him 2 of each. Put it on my tab." Crassus's smile gradually disappeared. Looking at Julian and Douglas who were watching on the sidelines, he came up with a plan and said with a smile, "I've always been curious about one thing. People always say that Julian is the best sorcerer of the ice class, and Douglas is the best frost dragon. Ice versus ice, which one of you is the best in the world? Who's number 1 in the world?" Amy had also made her way over with Ugly Duckling in her arms. Julian, who was initially indifferent to Crassus' provocation, subconsciously straightened his body when Amy came over. He revealed the aura of a master and looked at Douglas with a sharp gaze. Douglas glanced at Amy before looking at Julian. Their gazes met, and the temperature within a 2-meter radius of the dining table suddenly dropped. An ice wall even gradually appeared between the two of them. "You're not allowed to fight in the restaurant." A ball of flame suddenly appeared and shuttled back and forth a few times in the ice wall that hadn't fully formed yet. The ice instantly vaporized, and the temperature returned to normal. Douglas knew that this was the favorite disciple of Crassus and Julian, as well as the daughter of the restaurant's owner. Naturally, he wouldn't be angry because of such a small action. He wasn't going to fight in the restaurant, either. Instead, he was smiling as he wanted to see how Julian would explain to his obedient disciple. Both of them were adept at using ice. People often compared the two of them. Who was stronger and who was weaker was still undetermined. In terms of the frost domain, he was naturally stronger. However, he wasn't completely confident that he could make Julian enter the range of the frost domain before his magic arrived. "Little Amy, let me tell you. The most powerful ice magic caster isn't afraid of eating stir-fried octopus tentacles and octopus balls. As long as you order a portion of stir-fried octopus tentacles for them, we'll see who dares to finish it all. Naturally, they'll be the most powerful ice magic caster," Crassus offered with a chuckle before Julian could speak. "Is that so? I ate a lot of octopus tentacles and octopus balls for lunch today." Amy looked at Julian and asked curiously, "Master Julian, is that so?" Julian's expression froze. If it weren't for the fact that he didn't want to fight in the restaurant, Crassus would have been killed 10,000 times by his glare. "Uncle, you don't dare to eat octopus balls either? They're round, small, and super cute." Amy turned to look at Douglas in disbelief. This time, it was Douglas's turn to be dumbfounded. If he didn't dare to eat the octopus balls that the little girl said were very cute, wouldn't it be very embarrassing? Oh, I'm super awesome indeed. Amy nodded thoughtfully. Of course I dare to eat them. Julian looked at Yabamiya and said, I'll also have a portion of stir-fried octopus tentacles and octopus balls. It's just octopus tentacles. What's so scary about them? I'll have a portion of each too, Douglas added. At a time like this, he definitely couldn't show weakness. Although the two of them looked like they had made up their minds, Amy didn't show the slightest bit of admiration. She carried Ugly Duckling back to the back of the counter with interest. It's just octopus balls. Even Ugly Duckling can easily finish one in one bite. The powerhouses from the various races who were sitting a little further away all looked at this table with admiration. They were indeed the strongest powerhouses of the Norland continent. After yesterday's battle, they still dared to order octopus tentacles. Don't leave after eating, Julian said to Crassus coldly. Are you going to hit me if I don't leave? Crassus looked like a hoodlum. Anyway, he couldn't let him suffer such grievances alone. Now everyone was fair. The four of them each ordered a few more dishes. Yabamiya walked to the next table, a little confused. It's indeed right to stay away from them. They're all perverts. Dracula retracted his gaze and flipped open the menu to see what he wanted to eat for lunch. Uncle, your clothes look quite nice. Is it custom-made? Harrison, who was sitting opposite him, asked cautiously. Dracula looked up at him. He tidied his tuxedo and proudly said, Yes, it was custom-made by the best tailor in the Boundless Sea realm. It's a pity that the Boundless Sea realm is a little far away. Otherwise, I would also get one. Harrison had a look of pity. It's not your size. Dracula rolled his eyes. This little fatty really didn't know his place at all. Isn't it custom-made? Of course, the size isn't a problem. Harrison smiled nonchalantly. What would you like to order? Yabamiya came to their table. Beautiful lady, please give me a black pepper steak and a glass of beer, Dracula said with a smile. Miss Mia, I'd like a set of stir-fried octopus tentacles, a large portion of octopus balls, 10 skewers of roasted pig's eyes, a portion of stinky tofu, a portion of rice, and a glass of beer. Thank you, Harrison continued to order. Chapter 1817. Huh? Dracula suddenly lost his composure. He thought that no one would order food made with such a scary ingredient like octopus since they were far away from Crassus' table. He didn't expect that after walking around and finding such a secluded table for two, this little fatty at the same table actually ordered both. Not only did he order the stir-fried octopus tentacles and octopus balls, but he also ordered the roasted pig's eyes. What kind of scary food was this? Could it be that he roasted it with the eyeballs of the octopus tentacles? Also, what was stinky tofu? As a vampire with mysophobia, how could he tolerate stinky food being served to his table? Harrison looked at Dracula, who had a strange expression, and smiled warmly. Uncle, don't you want a helping of stinky tofu? This is the treasure of Immerse. You won't be able to find such a unique delicacy even if you search the entire Norland continent once you step out of this door. I don't want it. Dracula rejected without hesitation. He looked at Harrison impatiently as he thought about how to get this little fatty to change tables. If you don't want to eat stinky tofu, then why are you sitting at the designated stinky tofu area? Harrison asked curiously. Designated stinky tofu area? This time, it was Dracula's turn to be dumbfounded. Some customers don't eat stinky tofu, so Mr. Mack specially divided a designated stinky tofu area for customers who eat stinky tofu to sit together. It's the table for two against the wall. Harrison nodded with a smile. Seems like this is your first time eating at Immerse? Who said so? It's not my first time here, Dracula said seriously. It was just that he hadn't been here during normal business hours. This put him in a difficult position. If he left alone, it would be embarrassing. Moreover, the restaurant was already full. There were no empty seats. If he let Harrison leave, then other people would most likely order stinky tofu when they sat down. It would be a waste of effort. Don't worry if you haven't tried stinky tofu before. It's a magical delicacy that smells bad but tastes good. Once you get used to its taste, you will definitely fall in love with it, Harrison said with a chuckle. Worry? Hee hee, why would I be worried about a dish? Dracula curled his lips in disdain. He could not show weakness in front of a human fatty. He was the face of the vampires. I want a portion of stir-fried octopus tentacles. I want one too. I want to try the new product. I want 2 large portions of octopus balls. The experts from the various races couldn't remain calm as they listened to the orders being placed around them. No one would have thought that these customers would be so enthusiastic about the food made from octopus. For a moment, they couldn't sit still. They just wanted to eat faster and run away after eating. What would you like to eat? Yabamiya came to Gloria and Irina's table. Irina shook her head. Here are your stir-fried octopus tentacles and octopus balls. Yabamiya and Angela carried 5 portions of stir-fried octopus tentacles and 5 portions of octopus balls to Crassus and the others' table. The 4 top-tier 10th-tier powerhouses looked up at the same time. This light is quite unique, Crassus praised. Yeah, it's quite bright. Lewis nodded slightly. Stop pretending. You ordered the octopus tentacles yourself. You have to finish them even if you have to kneel down. Don't you even have the courage to take a look? Jeffrey sneered. Who wants to take a look? Do you have eyes up there? I have trypophobia, Douglas said with an unnatural expression. The surrounding customers looked at the table with strange expressions. They didn't know what these masters were doing. However, they couldn't help but swallow their saliva when they saw the dishes on the table. It smells quite good. Crassus sniffed and couldn't help but gulp a little. As soon as he said that, the 3 who were originally tense and had planned to block off their sense of smell couldn't help but sniff as well. Gulp. A clear gulping sound was heard. The 3 of them couldn't maintain their expressions. Chapter 18:18. The delicious aroma was extremely invasive after the stir-frying. It wafted into everyone's noses along with the rising steam. Crassus lowered his gaze slowly and stole a glance at the dishes on the table. He raised his eyebrows in surprise. The colorful dish should be the stir-fried octopus tentacles. The colorful side dishes were mixed with the octopus tentacles that were cut into small pieces. It looked appetizing. It turned out that the octopus tentacles were so small. They were only as thick as a thumb, and there were no eyeballs on them. The surface of the octopus tentacles was shiny with the color of the sauce, making them look very tempting. As for the octopus balls, they should be the golden balls that were arranged neatly on the black square plate. They were just the right size and covered with a layer of fine wood shavings. Huh! Crassus stared at the wood shavings with his eyes wide open. These things are actually moving? Could they not be wood shavings, but some kind of thin worm? Crassus lowered his head and looked at the moving wood shavings carefully. They looked really strange, but they were not scary. The 2 octopus dishes were completely different from what he had expected. They did not look scary at all. The stir-fried octopus tentacles were bright and attractive, while the octopus balls were cute and strange. It seemed like there was a huge difference between an ordinary octopus and that octopus monster. It's not scary at all. Crassus raised his eyebrows and looked at the 3 people who did not dare to look at the table. He immediately looked troubled. This is a little too scary, isn't it? The 3 people who were ready to take a look at Crassus when they saw him lowering his head retracted their gazes when they heard him. Hey, you guys should take a look too. The dishes are already served. Why don't you guys take a look? You can't let me suffer alone, Crassus said hurriedly. The 3 of them were unmoved. Look, we're all level 10. Is this all you have? It seems like I'll have to be the warrior. Crassus put an octopus tentacle into his mouth with a fearless expression. The 3 of them looked at Crassus from the corner of their eyes at the same time. Crassus opened his mouth and chewed. His eyes lit up. The crispy octopus tentacles had an excellent texture. As soon as he bit into them, the fresh taste of the octopus exploded in his mouth. It was so delicious that it instantly filled his mouth and directly attacked his soul. Crassus felt as if he was suddenly immersed in the boundless ocean. He did not feel any fear. What was even more incredible was that he had gained the ability to breathe in the ocean. He looked around curiously. In the deep blue sea, there were fish that occasionally passed by him, but they were not afraid of him at all. Then he found a flickering flame in the depths of the sea. Why is there fire in the depths of the sea? He swam towards the flame in surprise, but no matter how close he got, the flame always kept a certain distance from him, jumping around in a strange way. The pressure of the surrounding seawater increased, but Crassus's eyes gradually became clear. In the flickering flames, he seemed to see some incredible laws. Crassus suddenly let out a long breath, as if he had been holding in the water for a long time. He looked at the chopsticks in his hand that he had not put down. Then, he came back to his senses and realized that he was eating. What was that just now? Crassus was a little confused. Could it be that what he saw just now was an illusion? However, this illusion was completely different from what he saw when he was controlled by the octopus monster in the catacombs. He vaguely felt that if he could completely control that flickering flame, his strength might be able to improve further. Could it be related to this octopus? Crassus picked up another octopus tentacle. After hesitating for a while, he put it into his mouth. As soon as he chewed, the delicious taste began to spread. He entered that mysterious state again. Julian, Louis, and the others looked at Crassus, who had entered a trance after taking a bite of the octopus tentacle. They were surprised and looked down. The dishes on the table were unexpectedly delicious. There were no scary tentacles, no scarlet eyeballs, and even a little cute? Is this its son? Louis stroked his chin. This should be a normal-sized octopus from the boundless ocean, Douglas deduced. It doesn't look like anything special. Julian picked up his chopsticks, picked up an octopus tentacle, and put it into his mouth. Before Crassus could savor the taste of the octopus tentacle, an endless ice field appeared in front of him. Is it really that delicious? Louis looked at the two stunned men. After hesitating for a while, he picked up an octopus ball and put it into his mouth. Oh, it's hot. Louis, who was about to open the octopus ball, opened his mouth and exhaled a few times. Then he quickly entered a mysterious state as well. Douglas could not stand their behavior. He picked up an octopus tentacle and put it into his mouth. He muttered in his heart, "Isn't it just an octopus tentacle? Why are all of you being so mysterious?" Then he saw an ice mirror between heaven and earth. The four of them recovered from that mysterious state almost at the same time. They happened to meet each other's eyes, then swallowed their saliva at the same time. What did you see? Crassus felt that his throat was a little dry. Something very mysterious. Louis still had a look of disbelief on his face. I have to say that these octopus tentacles might be able to bring us great benefits, Douglas said with a grave expression. He guessed that the things they saw might be different, but the meaning should be the same. Interesting. Julian only said 2 words as he picked up a second octopus tentacle. Crassus and the others did not say anything else, and continued eating. Is it really that delicious? They're not in cahoots with each other, are they? This is an octopus tentacle. They're actually enjoying it so much. The powerhouses, who were originally waiting to see the big shots embarrassed, were all shocked when they saw the 4 of them eating the stir-fried octopus tentacles and octopus balls with a satisfied expression. Harrison picked up a skewer of roasted pig's eyes and introduced it to Dracula with an infatuated expression. Look at the quality of these roasted pig's eyes. The thin eyeballs are wrapped in a plump liquid, and it looks like they're going to explode if they're roasted for a while longer. Only Mr. Mac can master such a skill. I heard that someone outside wanted to imitate it, and his eyeballs exploded all over the floor, scalding himself until he became an idiot. Dracula took a look at the skewered eyeballs, and immediately thought of the octopus tentacles that were filled with eyeballs. These were called pig's eyes, but who knew if they were actually roasted with octopus tentacles? Dracula forcefully suppressed the churning in his stomach, and glanced at Harrison. These things looked so scary, but this little fatty actually liked them so much. This kind of courage was not something that ordinary people could have. PFFF, Harrison bit off an eyeball. When the eyeball was bitten open, Dracula clearly heard the sound of it breaking. Who the fuck can take this? Dracula looked at the goosebumps on his hands and instantly lost his composure. Chapter 1819. Harrison ate a roasted pig's eye with each bite. He was tormented between the scalding and the delicious taste. His eyes were squinted from the pressure of the fat on his face. He was already intoxicated. Dracula lowered his head and fiddled with the black pepper steak in front of him. He took a deep breath to calm himself down so that he wouldn't be unable to control himself and send the little fatty flying with a slap. "Uncle, do you want to try a skewer?" After finishing 2 skewers and downing half a glass of beer, Harrison picked up a skewer and looked at Dracula with a smile. "Oh." Dracula rejected him expressionlessly. There was a saying that one shouldn't hit a smiling person. This little fatty's attitude made it difficult for him to flare up. "Then I won't stand on ceremony." Harrison smiled awkwardly and bit another pig's eye. The veins on Dracula's forehead twitched a few times, and he almost couldn't hold it in. He picked up a piece of beef with his fork and put it into his mouth. The aroma of the red wine and the rich taste of the beef mixed in his mouth. Only then did he focus on the steak in front of him. "This steak is really something that I can never get tired of. And this red wine. What a waste of good things. Your stinky tofu." Angela placed a round plate covered with a golden cover in front of Harrison before removing the cover. The unique aroma of the stinky tofu was like a fragrant bomb that exploded instantly. Blurg, Dracula, who was immersed in the delicious steak, almost vomited after taking just a whiff. Did someone's toilet explode? Dracula covered his nose and waved his hand to form an aura barrier around him. He looked at the box of black stuff in front of the little fatty in disbelief. "Hee hee, Uncle, is this the top-notch delicacy, stinky tofu?" Harrison picked up a piece of black stinky tofu with his chopsticks as if he was presenting a treasure. He first dipped it in the broth, then wrapped it in the broth before putting it into his mouth. "This taste. It's like the soul has ascended to heaven." Harrison began to roll his eyes, and his face sank. What kind of freaking monster is this? Are humans so ferocious now? Harrison was dumbfounded. "Looks like I can't drink human blood anymore. It's no longer pure. Your stir-fried octopus tentacles, octopus balls, and rice?" Soon, Yabamiya brought 2 more dishes to Harrison. As soon as he heard the name of the dish, Dracula shifted his gaze elsewhere and began to seriously consider whether he should just grab his steak and run away. If this went on, he really wouldn't be able to finish the meal properly, even if the steak was very delicious. "Mr. Mac, you're awesome. This dish is as beautiful as a flower, and these little meatballs are so cute." Harrison was already praising. "As if I'd believe your nonsense. This little fatty is very bad." Count rolled his eyes and remained unmoved. "Hey, Uncle, if you don't like stinky tofu and roasted pig's eyes, why don't you try this?" Harrison looked at Dracula and said. He felt a little apologetic as he felt that his stinky tofu had affected Dracula's meal. "Oh." Count coldly refused. What a joke. Even if he were to die here today, he would absolutely not eat any octopus tentacles. This uncle is a little arrogant. Harrison was deep in thought. In order to prevent the other party from being disgusted, he didn't try to persuade him anymore. He picked up an octopus tentacle and put it into his mouth. This time, there was complete silence. Dracula was a little unaccustomed to the sudden silence from Harrison, who had been listening to all sorts of exaggerated praises and exclamations. Retribution is here, right? Who told you to eat anything?" Dracula laughed in his heart. He glanced sideways at Harrison, and his eyes widened instantly. This little fatty wasn't frightened. Instead, he was immersed in a kind of intoxicated state. That blurry expression and slightly curled orchid fingers made it seem like he had seen something magical. What's going on now? Could this stir-fried octopus tentacles really be so delicious and magical? Dracula was a little confused. After hesitating for a while, he still couldn't help but look down. There were 2 new dishes on the table. The brightly colored stir-fried dish had red and green peppers and purple-skinned onions taking up half of it. The other half was cut into small pieces of octopus tentacles. The surface was smooth, and there weren't any eyeballs or anything like that. Furthermore, it was only the thickness of a little finger. It was hard to associate it with the octopus monster that was like a mountain of flesh in the underground cavern. Meanwhile, the square plate next to it should be the so-called small octopus balls. They were all golden and looked very exquisite and cute indeed. That's it? Dracula was stunned. He felt that his feelings had been deceived. Could this be called octopus tentacles? This was a little brother. At this moment, Harrison also came back to his senses. He looked at Dracula with a surprised expression and said, "Uncle, you must try this. I've seen the true meaning of life." As he said that, he even pushed the plate in front of him a little in Dracula's direction. The corner of the plate squeezed into Dracula's aura boundary. The fragrance of the stir-fried octopus tentacles suddenly bloomed. This fragrance! There was some shock in Dracula's eyes. The rich fragrance rushed into his nose domineeringly. It was the ultimate freshness of seafood. With the addition of the side dishes and seasonings, it became so tempting. As a vampire who had lived in the endless sea for hundreds of years, he knew that octopuses belonged to the sea. The ancestor of the fear demons reared a big octopus. However, he had never thought that someone would make octopus into a dish, and it was actually so delicious and tempting. Gulp. Dracula's throat rolled, and his old face turned red. He was craving it. However, he was the ancestor of the vampires. The burden of being an idol was a little heavy. Look, those lords are enjoying it so much. Harrison used his eyes to signal in the direction of Crassus and the rest. He smiled and said, "Mr. Mac's new dish is definitely worth trying." Dracula glanced back and happened to see Louis pick up a small octopus ball and put it into his mouth. The other three were holding chopsticks and looking for octopus tentacles in a pile of side dishes. What the fuck? Dracula suddenly felt that his burden was gone. Here, try it. Harrison passed him a pair of chopsticks with a smile. Dracula did not stand on ceremony. He picked up an octopus tentacle and put it into his mouth directly. Ow, this taste! The crisp octopus tentacle was easily bitten open. It was slightly spicy, but very refreshing. The sauce gave it layers of rich taste. Meanwhile, the freshness that was hidden in it was released crazily as he chewed. As a vampire who grew up facing the sea, he had never experienced the freshness of the sea so deeply before. What was even more unbelievable was that he actually dared to taste it in an inland city like Chaos City. No words could describe what he was feeling now. There were only two words that could express his feelings right now. Smells so good. No pop-up window. Chapter 1820. As a newly advanced vampire ancestor, Dracula was still in the exploration stage of the ancient vampire bloodline. He had become stronger, but he had yet to reach his strongest state, and could not be compared to that elder in his clan. Although he thought that he was a rare genius, Dracula was already prepared to use 300 years to slowly understand it and completely control the ancestors' power. During this period of time, he vaguely felt that his bloodline was blocked when he was cultivating, and the fusion was not going smoothly. However, even he could not check the situation in his body, so he could not solve it immediately. What was unbelievable was that after eating that octopus tentacle, he actually managed to look into himself and see how the golden ancestor's bloodline was circulating in his body. Although it was slowly fusing with his own bloodline, the process was not very smooth and there were many obstacles. However, as long as he could determine the situation of these obstacles, he would definitely be able to find a suitable way to solve them and complete the bloodline fusion step even faster. This is too magical, isn't it? How could an ordinary-looking octopus tentacle have such a miraculous effect? Dracula looked at the stir-fried octopus tentacle in front of him in disbelief. He blinked to make sure that he was not dreaming. Delicious, right? Harrison took a big mouthful of rice and looked at Dracula with a smile. This was the first time he was interested in something Dracula recommended. As he spoke, he reached out with his chopsticks to pick up more food. Smith. A pair of chopsticks hit his chopsticks. Your stir-fried octopus tentacle is very fragrant, but it's mine now, Dracula said domineeringly as he placed the octopus tentacle in front of him. Harrison was dumbfounded. You can order another one. This lunch is on me, Dracula said cheerfully as he took the octopus balls away. Harrison retracted the chopsticks that he had extended halfway. Looking at the two dishes that were already far away from him, he suddenly regretted recommending them so enthusiastically. However, seeing that Dracula agreed to treat him, he very happily forgave him. Miss Mia, I'd like 2 servings of stir-fried octopus tentacles and 2 servings of large octopus balls, as well as a beggar's chicken and 2 mugs of beer. Harrison ordered happily. Dracula, who was about to taste the octopus balls, raised his head and asked, I only ate 1 portion of yours. Why did you order 2 portions with a chicken and 2 glasses of beer? Double the amount, double the happiness. Harrison chuckled. It would be a waste not to eat it. Count was speechless, unable to refute. He could only continue to immerse himself in the joy brought by the octopus balls and stir-fried octopus tentacles. The stir-fried octopus tentacles and octopus balls brought a great surprise to the customers in the restaurant. Chaos City was located inland, so normal people wouldn't be able to eat expensive food like seafood. Even for those who frequented the restaurant, it wasn't easy for them to taste fresh seafood. Even if they used a flying steed, they couldn't guarantee that the seafood caught from the sea would still be alive when they reached Chaos City, let alone taste the fresh delicacies that had just been caught from the sea. If they wanted to eat it, they would have to go to the boundless sea realm personally. But today's stir-fried octopus tentacles and octopus balls brought them a great surprise. The fresh taste, the crispy and refreshing octopus tentacles. The combination of freshness and deliciousness was mesmerizing. Even the seafood that had just been caught from the sea and cooked on the spot couldn't compare to this. What was even more unbelievable was its price. A serving of stir-fried octopus tentacles cost 100 copper coins, while the octopus balls cost 60 and 40 copper coins per serving according to the size. One had to know that at Mamie's, a set of soybean milk and youtiao for breakfast cost 300 copper coins. It wasn't that the soybean milk and youtiao were not worth this price. As a must-have breakfast for many customers, there was nothing more worthwhile than exchanging 300 copper coins for a full day's worth of energy and happiness. It was just that octopus was such a precious ingredient, and the two dishes looked rather complicated. Furthermore, the taste was so delicious and outstanding, yet the price was set far below everyone's expectations. It was really puzzling. Of course, it was also because of its low price that it became a must-have for almost all the customers today. With 100 copper coins, you wouldn't suffer a loss. With 100 copper coins, you wouldn't be fooled. Where did Mr. Mac get the wool of capitalism from? Is he subsidizing us with a big meal? I'm more curious about where Mr. Mac got the ingredients from. The price is actually so good. After eating, everyone was even more curious. And the powerhouses of various races who originally kept a respectful distance from the octopus tentacles couldn't persevere in the end under the lively discussion of the surrounding customers. They all joined the team to evaluate the new product and then fell in love with it. Gloria carefully blew on the octopus balls between her chopsticks. She looked charmingly naive as she blew on them with her small mouth. The waitress who had just served the food reminded her that the octopus balls were very hot inside, so she had to wait for a while before eating. This girl is quite cute. Irina ate the fried rice absent-mindedly while sizing up Gloria without batting an eyelid. When she saw the letter the day before yesterday, she was indeed a little interested in the girl who wrote the letter. However, after meeting her today, she was impeccable no matter whether it was the way she talked or the way she interacted with people. She was pure in nature, and her character was gentle but not weak. She didn't really want to find trouble with her. Meg hid his identity and opened this restaurant in Chaos City with Amy alone. Such an outstanding man without an owner, it was inevitable that some girls would fall in love with him. And she was prepared to come back and declare her sovereignty over him. They could like him, but they had to know that he was her man. Even if they liked him, they had to hide it well. Otherwise, they couldn't blame her for serving them with a bench. After blowing on the octopus balls for a while, Gloria finally bit into them carefully. Although the octopus wasn't big, it was a little difficult for her to eat it in one bite, and it didn't look very ladylike. Hence, she bit into them in small bites, and at the same time, she could test if it was too hot. The golden case was a little crispy and had a faint egg aroma. After she bit into it gently, the rich aroma sealed in the octopus ball gushed out instantly. It was a fresh and sweet smell. The inside of the octopus ball was filled with stuffing. There were finely chopped red peppers, onions, cabbage, whole corn kernels, and octopus tentacles that had been cut into small pieces. It presented the most perfect state. She bit off some of the stuffing in this bite and chewed it carefully. The crispy outer shell blended with the soft and delicious stuffing. The fragrant and sweet vegetables and fresh octopus tentacles complemented each other, bringing out a wonderful feast on the tip of the tongue. Her eyes curved into small crescents, and a smile appeared on her lips. Is it really that good? Irina's throat moved with some doubt. Chapter 1821. Just as Irina expected, Meg didn't use the octopus monster in the underground cavern when he made the stir-fried octopus tentacles and octopus balls. Instead, he used small octopus tentacles that were only as thick as a thumb. Although she was a little resistant to this kind of tentacle-type ingredients, when her surroundings were filled with the wonderful aroma of stir-fried octopus tentacles and everyone was immersed in it, and when she looked at Gloria who was sitting opposite her and eating the octopus balls with relish, she felt as if a feather was tickling her heart. She wanted to try it. Gloria finished eating an octopus ball in small bites. When she opened her eyes, she happened to meet Irina's gaze. "Miss Audrey, do you want to try it? These octopus balls are really delicious," Gloria invited with a smile and moved the octopus ball a little towards Irina's direction. Irina looked at Gloria's honest gaze and hesitated for a moment. She picked up the chopsticks and picked up a ball. She smiled and said, "Thank you." After that, she directly put the whole octopus ball into her mouth. Her intuition told her that the octopus ball, which was covered with mojito and seaweed on the surface, sprinkled with seaweed powder, and wrapped in ketchup and salad dressing, should be eaten in one bite. That was the most correct way to eat it. The octopus ball exploded in her mouth as soon as she bit it. The slightly hot temperature wasn't enough to hurt her. Instead, it instantly activated her taste buds. The sweet and sour sauce wrapped around the fragrant charred shell. The mojito had a hint of smoky taste, and the seaweed powder and seaweed shreds added some flavor. After the octopus ball exploded, it blended perfectly with the fresh and sweet vegetables, crispy and sweet corn, and the delicious octopus tentacles in her mouth. At this moment, Irina felt that her soul had been sublimated and comforted. She subconsciously closed her eyes. Then she saw a smooth beam of light across the sky, piercing through the night. Holy light! Irina was shocked. Her body floated towards the sky, trying to chase after the light that was getting brighter and brighter, almost lighting up the entire sky. After a long time, Irina slowly opened her eyes. She couldn't hide the shock in her eyes. She didn't catch up to that holy light in the end, but she saw a wider world. What she thought was the upper limit was just her own limit. The real holy light had no upper limit. It could tear through the night and the galaxy. It came from endless places and went to the endless universe. It couldn't be stopped, and it would never stop. That was the real law of the holy light. The so-called holy light technique was created after the creator mastered a certain amount of the law. Irina thought. The upper limit was the creator's understanding of the law of the holy light. If she could further understand the law of holy light, she would be able to increase the power of her holy light technique. The holy light could disperse the demonic aura emitted by the great old ones, but the damage to their bodies was negligible. And a strong holy light should be able to severely injure the great old ones, and even completely annihilate them. That illusion earlier seemed to be because of this octopus tentacle? Mia, I want 2 more large portions of octopus balls, Irina said to Yabamiya, who was walking over. Huh. Yabamiya was a little surprised that this beautiful young lady actually knew her name and called it so intimately. However, she quickly smiled and nodded and said, "All right, please wait a moment." Gloria was also a little surprised that Irina actually ordered 2 more large portions of octopus balls. She couldn't help but glance at her slender waist and was a little envious. You can eat so much and still maintain such a good figure. That's really enviable. Have some more if you like it. Gloria looked at Irina with a generous smile. Then I won't be polite, I'll return it to you later. Irina was eager to confirm her thoughts, so she picked up another octopus ball and put it into her mouth. When the octopus ball was bitten open, the wonderful taste began to spread in her mouth, and the holy light arrived as expected. As expected, after a long time, Irina opened her eyes. They were flickering with joy and confusion. Just as she thought, the illusion was caused by the octopus balls. After entering the illusion, she had a chance to see the holy light and the traces it left behind. This was a very mysterious state. With her understanding of the holy light technique, she could easily capture some of the holy light law, but she still couldn't understand the more majestic laws. However, just this one glance was equivalent to a year of her self-understanding of the holy light technique. If she could see more of the holy light, she would have more chances to comprehend the holy light law. However, why does this seemingly ordinary octopus tentacle have such a mysterious effect? Is this illusion related to that octopus monster? What they saw is the same as what I saw. One question after another flashed through Irina's mind. She turned to look at Meg in the kitchen. This guy, he didn't even tell her in advance. Gloria looked at Irina, who turned to look in the direction of the kitchen, and couldn't help but feel a little worried. She recalled what she said at the door. "Miss Audrey, don't tell me you've already fallen for Mr. Meg?" When she thought of this, she suddenly regretted recommending the octopus balls to Audrey. This kind of cute and delicious delicacy could easily win a girl's heart. Irina turned around and met Gloria's gaze. She smiled slyly. "Are you worried that I've fallen for him?" "I'm not." Gloria blushed and shook her head in a panic. She lowered her eyes and didn't dare to meet Irina's gaze. It was as if that pair of clear eyes could easily see through her thoughts. Irina's lips curled up. She found this girl more and more interesting. Although she couldn't give Meg to her, she still wanted to make friends with her. 2 servings of octopus balls were quickly served. "Here, I ate 2 of yours. I'll return 3 to you." Irina pushed a serving of octopus balls in Gloria's direction and said with a smile, "Of course, if you can finish this, you can eat all of them." "I can't eat that much. Eat more. I'll get fat." Gloria hurriedly waved her hand. However, when she looked at the golden balls, she couldn't bear to refuse. After hesitating for a while, she still said with a guilty conscience, "I'll eat 2 more." "As you like." Irina nodded. She had already picked up a ball and put it into her mouth. She felt the descent of the holy light again. No pop-up window. That you're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.